among her own MPs at the government's push to build more houses.
It's Wednesday, the 31st of July. Your headlines. Iran says the Hamas political leader of the Gazan armed group was assassinated.
Hamas says the killing was a treacherous Zionist raid on his residence.
From Beirut, where within the past 12 hours, the Israelis say they have hit a senior Hezbollah commander. Now there are fears for a wider spread across the region.
And here in Southport, thousands of people gathered to remember the 3 young girls killed in an attack here at a holiday club. Meanwhile, dozens of police officers were injured during clashes with protesters outside a local mosque. The Home Secretary urged people not to spread false information about the suspect.
A very good morning to you. We begin with the breaking news. The political leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, has been killed in Tehran. Iran's Revolutionary Guard says he was assassinated at his residence in the Iranian capital. The cause of his death is under investigation. Hamas has said Haniyeh was killed alongside one of his bodyguards. We're joined by our international correspondent, John Sparks, who's in Jerusalem for us. We'll be shortly joined by Alex Crawford in Beirut as well. John, firstly, kick us off. Who was Haniyeh and how significant is it that he's been assassinated in Iran, no less?
Good morning, Wilfred. It's significant. I mean, this is a massive escalation in what has become a regional conflict, a regional war. It's quite outside of the parameters of what we have seen so far. 2 mainly localized wars in Gaza and in and around the Lebanese border. In the last 24 hours, the targeting of 2 leaders of Iran-backed groups. First, Fuad Shukr in Beirut, senior Hezbollah commander who the Israelis say was responsible for the attack in Majd al-Shams that killed 12 children. The second, this assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the top leader or one of the top leaders of Hamas, last seen yesterday in Tehran, the Iranian capital. He was there for the inauguration of the new Iranian president. He has been based in Qatar since 2017. Tough talking character. You know, Wilfred, he was leading the negotiations for Hamas with Israel for a ceasefire agreement. He was leading the negotiations over the hostages, the hostage exchange. It now seems that the Israelis have taken him out. And I think one of the key questions on my mind is what happens to the ceasefire negotiations? What happens to the hostage negotiations? The Israelis haven't claimed responsibility for this. They rarely do, but I don't think there's much doubt in people's minds that they are responsible. The Iranian Revolutionary Guards, they are the sort of powerful military faction in Iran. They say they are investigating it. They say they don't know how it happened, but we believe the assassination took place in a residential building in central Tehran. And you know what? That is an embarrassing breach of security for the Iranians. So we're plunged into the unknown here. The Iranians highly likely to see this as an act of war. I think this conflict broadens, it deepens. I think the risks increase for everyone.
Alex Crawford able to join us as well now, our special correspondent who's in Beirut. And Alex, I mean, there's been significantly elevated tensions in the last couple of days across the region. Does this escalate it further?
I think it definitely does. I mean, the Israelis have shown that they can hit Hezbollah and Hamas leaders in 2 capitals in the region in the lead up to their strike in Beirut, which they say was very targeted. It certainly hit just 1 building, but it was in a very heavily populated area, considered a stronghold of Hezbollah. And according to the Lebanese Ministry of Health, there were a number of civilians also wounded. More than 70, they say, including a couple of children who were killed and a number of others critically wounded. And Hezbollah still haven't accepted or announced that that commander that they say, the Israelis say they killed, is actually dead, although they have, within the past half hour, admitted that he was present in the building. But the Israelis clearly showing that they can hunt down these leaders wherever they are. And striking at the heart of two capitals. And the lead up to this, speaking to Lebanese authorities, the UN, all those involved in the behind-the-scenes negotiations to try to urge everyone and all the parties involved to show maximum restraint. They were definitely led to believe, as they passed on to us, that the Israeli strikes would be, in their words, limited. The Lebanese authorities indicated through their very close connections with Hezbollah what Hezbollah would consider red lines, and striking at the heart of Beirut was considered one of them. The Lebanese authorities also obviously trying to temper very raw and wild emotions around here, and all the continued claims of retaliation from all sides. The past 9 months or so, though, Hezbollah's leader has made it repeatedly clear in a selection of public speeches that he did not want an escalation in the war, but he kept on insisting that Hezbollah was ready. I think the Israelis have issued a very, very strong message to the region that they are not prepared to stand by and let these people who they consider have orchestrated a lot of the attacks against Israel over the past 9-10 months go on and have normal lives. And I think it will have, well, right now we'll have to see what the response is from both Hezbollah and Iran, with both leaders of both those countries saying, and the wings, the military wings of those countries saying in the lead up to this that they would retaliate. So I think it's very dangerous ground right now. You may also be aware that overnight the Americans hit what they called militia targets in Iraq as well, just north of Babylon. So there seems to be a very concerted effort to hit those who have been attacking Israel, and we really are in very dangerous territory right now.
Alex, touch on the US for us, because we've just seen some comments coming from the US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. He's finishing up a trip in the Philippines, and he said, I quote, "Don't think war's inevitable. I maintain that there's always room and opportunities for diplomacy." Are we, since President Biden decided to not seek re-election, in a little bit of a vacuum at the moment in terms of clear Western leadership putting pressure and guidance on the situation more broadly across the Middle East?
I think that definitely has had an impact. The fact that America is considered politically weak at the moment, with someone that they view as a lame duck president, and also with the country very much focused on its own internal elections. That's definitely seen as a vacuum of power and a vacuum of international authority. But this has rumbled on for 9-10 months, and the feeling in this part of the world, particularly amongst what they're calling the so-called axis of resistance, which ties in a number of different countries and a number of different big fighting groups, not just in Iran, who is funded, trained, and has a hand in all of these, but also in Iraq and Syria. And we've seen the Houthis in Yemen. Hezbollah is the strongest militarily, by far the strongest, but Israel can very justifiably claim that they are having a success over the past 12 hours or so, now reaching into the second day, with what they're calling targeted strikes hitting at the leaders of these people. They identified, or say that the Hezbollah commander that they targeted last night in Beirut, in the capital, was responsible for the attack on Majd al-Shams, which killed 12 Druze children, but also he had a hand in the 1983 bombings and attacks here in Beirut. So he's very much identified by the Israelis as being a significant figure in Hezbollah. The fact that civilians have also been wounded and killed, according to the Lebanese Ministry of Health, is is going to really, well, the temperature last night around the scene was absolutely electric. A number of journalists being attacked, punched, because they were seen to be biased or not presenting the news as Hezbollah wanted. They have a very strong hold on this country. They're in parts of the government authority and parts of the government infrastructure. They also are stronger militarily than the Lebanese army. And they're right on the border with Israel and have been engaging in this cross-border attacks for the past 9-10 months. The events over the last 12 hours or so overnight and this morning is not going to stop that violence right now. Will it explode into a huge regional war where everyone is still saying not because all the parties don't want it? But I think we are in very unknown territory at the moment, and it's extremely dangerous.
John, back to the latest development and the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas political leader. What does that do to the prospects of a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas itself? What were his personal views towards a potential deal? But also, what does it do for Netanyahu, who's got a lot of domestic political pressures himself, the fact that he might have engineered a high-profile assassination overnight?
Yeah, Wilfred, you know, that is a really good question. I mean, I have seen a series of messages on social media from Israeli cabinet ministers, members of the governing coalition, celebrating the death of Haniyeh. But, you know, I'm not sure what that does to the ceasefire negotiations, which are linked to the attempts to get the Israeli hostages out of Gaza and back home. So I think it is an excellent question. I mean, nobody in Israel is going to mourn the passing of Haniyeh, but it certainly puts more uncertainty on top of those negotiations, and that is probably the biggest political issue, the biggest domestic issue that Benjamin Netanyahu faces right now. He's not popular. We often forget that. The opinion polls in Israel come out at around 70% against. 70% of the population want him to step down. And the biggest issue, the biggest sort of bone of contention, if you will, is around the hostages. Netanyahu hasn't done enough to secure them. About Haniyeh, I mean, it's quite interesting. Yes, he was one of the top leaders of Hamas, but, you know, a lot of people saw him as something of a moderate within the organization, somebody who was willing and able to negotiate, not one of the hardliners. And he was in the process of negotiating from his base in Qatar. Now the Israelis have taken him out. They've taken out someone who they were negotiating with. So where does that leave these negotiations? I think it's a really important question.
We will be back with John and Alex throughout the morning to try and get more details on potential answers to those questions. And we'll also be speaking to the former Foreign Secretary, Philip Hammond, later in the morning as well. For now, Alex, John, thanks so much. Let's cross now to Southport, where Sarah Jane has the latest after Monday's stabbing attack that killed 3 young girls at a holiday club and, of course, led to severe reactions over the last 24 hours in Southport. SJ.
Thank you, Wilf. Yes, violent scenes last night, but before all that started to develop, thousands of people gathered here in Southport at a vigil last night to pay tribute to those 3 children killed in Monday's knife attack. The violent scenes happened later in the evening after the vigil had come to a close. Protesters clashing with police outside the local mosque here. We'll have more on all that for you in just a moment. But first, our chief North of England correspondent, Greg Milam, takes a look at what we know about the victims so far.
The faces of 3 young girls who all went to dance and never came home. 6-year-old BB King, 7-year-old Elsie Stancombe and 9-year-old Alice Aguiar. BB's family said no words could describe their devastation. Elsie's school called her loving and bright, a kind and caring friend. Alice's family said she would always be their princess. A number of other children and adults remain critically ill after what police called a ferocious attack minutes before the Taylor Swift-themed dance event was due to end. Leanne Lucas was one of the organisers of that event. She ran her own company, teaching children about their well-being through dance. She is one of those in hospital.
How many more children, Prime Minister? Are we going to do something?
There was some heckling as the Prime Minister came to see the scene for himself, a reflection of the horror that has swept far beyond this community.
What do you stand up for our children?
Today is not the time for politics. Today is the time to focus entirely on the families who are going through such pain and grief.
And a response too from Taylor Swift herself. The horror of yesterday's attack, she wrote, washing over her continuously. These were just little kids at a dance class. I am at a complete loss for how to ever convey my sympathies to these families. A fundraiser set up by fans of the star has now raised hundreds of thousands of pounds. And from the community, the sympathy and the flowers keep on coming. The shock, the disbelief is palpable. We're learning more about the awful events, including how the man who owned the building tried to stop the attacker. His wife told Sky News he saw the man with a child on the floor. He tried to grab the knife, but was himself stabbed. All he wanted to do, she said, was help that child, but he wasn't able to. There is so much for this community to process.
It is the hardest thing that it's children, you know, the innocence and, you know, the Taylor Swift connection, joy, happiness, laughter on the first day of the, you know, real summer holidays, then going to the screams and the silence.
The 17-year-old remains in custody on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. Sky News spoke to a former neighbour in Cardiff, where he was born, who said he was from a normal and lovely family and his mother was a good mum. This is an attack that has left its mark on even those used to dealing with the most awful of scenes. We can only imagine how long the scars will last for those who never thought this sort of horror could happen where they call home. Greg Milam, Sky News, Southport.
Well, as this community here in Southport reels from Monday's events, protests erupted on the streets of the town last night. Police clashing with rioters believed to be members of the English Defence League who gathered outside a mosque. Police say there has been online speculation about the identity of the suspect in custody, and some people are using it to engage in disorder. Officers repeated that the suspect was born in the UK and that the speculation unhelpful. Sky's Charlotte Leeming has this report.
Disorder on the streets of Southport, with riot police deployed after violence erupted outside a mosque. Police vehicles were set alight and projectiles thrown at officers. The chaos coming just hours after the Home Secretary said communities must be given time to heal and that it's extremely important people don't share dangerous disinformation online. Merseyside police condemned the behaviour, saying it started when a large group of people, who some believe are supporters of the English Defence League, threw items at the mosque. In a statement, the force said it's sickening to see this happening within a community that has been devastated by the tragic loss of 3 lives. The community came together in their hundreds, bound by shock, loss and grief. This was an outpouring of love and support. The turnout showed the scale of this tragedy. In front of a silent crowd, the Mayor of Sefton placed some flowers in the Town Hall gardens.
If anybody needs anything, they need to just cry out for us to help them. My background actually is child bereavement counsellor, so I know the effects it can have. The ripple effects last for years, but within all the family, all the community. So yeah, we have to be strong for each other.
After a minute's silence, people queued up to leave cards, flowers and soft toys, united in their mourning and still in shock at the devastating events in their hometown.
Your heart obviously just goes out to everyone that's involved in this, and I don't know, you hold yours a little bit tighter, don't you? You never want to be that person that's in that situation, what these poor families are going through at the moment, so we just wanted to come and show our respects, really.
It is really a caring place. People help each other, and I feel so many just wanted to come and be part of it.
This is what's going to get people through. This community support. I really believe that this right here now, what we're seeing, is what's going to get Southport through.
As this community navigates its future after such a major trauma, many say they'll get through it together. Charlotte Leeming, Sky News, Southport.
Well, after that peaceful protest, things changed quite quickly here in Southport, and there were rioting on the streets. Merseyside Police calling in reinforcements from Greater Manchester Police and Lancashire Police. We had an update from North West Ambulance Service overnight saying that they treated 39 patients in total, all of which were police officers. 27 were taken to hospital and 12 were treated at the scene. Merseyside Police confirming this morning that 22 officers were injured following the violent disorder in Southport last night. 8 sustaining serious injuries, including fractures, lacerations and a suspected broken nose and concussion. The clean-up operation and the aftermath of those violent scenes being felt here in Southport this morning will bring you some of that recovery operation throughout the morning here on Sky News. But right now, I'll hand back to Wilf in the studio. Morning, Wilf.
SJ, thanks so much for that, and good morning to you as well. Let's get the government's reaction to those scenes overnight. Matthew Pennycook, the Minister of State for Housing, is with me. Very good morning to you, Minister. We heard from the Home Secretary, from the Chancellor and the Prime Minister yesterday in terms of the initial stabbing events. The latest, obviously, is the violent disorder that SJ was just talking about overnight. What is your reaction to that?
Well, as we heard, we've 22 officers now injured. I've seen reports of vehicles belonging to members of the public set on fire, bricks, fireworks thrown at a mosque. I think it's absolutely appalling, if I'm honest. The community in Southport is reeling from the horrific events 2 days ago. From what I can see, they're trying to come together to support each other, to care for the families of the loved ones who've been killed, and to have that space for them to process the trauma, to grieve, overshadowed by this violence and disorder, I think is completely despicable. And the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister have made clear that those responsible will feel the full force of the law, and rightly so.
What do you think triggers it? And I guess more specifically, why do you think the Prime Minister was heckled as he was yesterday? I mean, you've only been in power for a few weeks.
I can't speak to the reasons why he was heckled. I think from what I saw of the footage and what I heard of the response, he was warmly welcomed. And I think it was absolutely right that he go to Southport to pay his respects. As to why the disorder is taking place, I think there's a number of reasons. One of the things that troubles me most is people coming in from outside Merseyside who aren't local to try and stir up public disorder, that trouble. And I think it's really worrying. It's not what the community, I don't think, would want. A peaceful vigil was taking place yesterday to honour those who were killed. That's been overshadowed, that's been interrupted. Really, the community needs that space to grieve, to process what's happened. And the police, who should be focusing on the criminal investigation that needs to take place into the incident, need to not be at the end of violence and abuse, but focus on that important investigation.
Let's move on to house building. Of course, your remit, and something your government has been very keen to focus on very, very quickly after the election. What is the precise target that we should measure you against after 5 years? Is 1.5 million homes finished by then?
We said we'd start 1.5 million new homes over the course of the Parliament over that 5 years. That's the target which you should measure us on. We didn't specifically set an annual target because the inheritance that we've picked up is so appalling. Housing supply is projected to drop below 200,000 homes a year. On the affordable side, we're seeing grant-funded housing reduced now to between 110,000 and 130,000, down from its 180,000 initial projection. So we're in a real downturn. The government made it worse by damaging changes to the National Planning Policy Framework enacted in December 2023, including abolishing mandatory housing targets. So those are the things that we've reversed yesterday in our first steps to fix the planning system and to get house building boosted once again.
And to be clear, green belts can and will be built on if local authorities don't meet their targets.
Well, what we said, if local authorities can't meet their targets through previously developed brownfield land in the first instance or in cooperation with neighbouring boroughs, they should look to then release low-quality grey belt land within the green belt. And lots of the package yesterday was focused on the targeted release of that grey belt land. But in certain circumstances, certain local authorities may, if they can't through brownfield or in cooperation with neighbours or through grey belt release, need to release some elements of the green belt. That happens already, just to be really clear. We've not inherited a situation where the previous government didn't release any green belt land at all. They were releasing it in quantity, but in a haphazard, unplanned way, and often in a way that didn't meet local housing needs. So what we're saying is there's a smarter way to release the right bits of the green belt, grey belt, low-quality land primarily, and to ensure through our golden rules that when it is released, we get development that meets local housing needs. So high rates of affordable housing, good infrastructure and amenities, good access to open green space.
But you can force local authorities to release it if they're not meeting their targets.
They will have to release it, both through the plan-making side of things, if you like. Got to put local plans in place across the country. We've only got a third of up-to-date local plans. That is just not acceptable in a local plan-led planning system. So what local councils will face is when they're putting their plans in place, a sequential test for releasing land, brownfield first, then grey belt, then in extremis green belt land. But if they don't have those local plans in place or they're not performing adequately against their housing targets, grey belt land could be released through that route.
Which is a really big step, and I just wonder whether the 1.5 million home targets is too low. If you're putting this as such a big priority so early in your parliament, you're taking steps like that. If 1 million homes were built in the last parliament, can and should Labour build more than 1.5 million over 5 years?
Well, you're right that we said we'd act quickly and decisively to start to tackle the housing crisis, to unlock economic growth. That's what we've done through the changes yesterday, which are the first steps to fix our planning system. We think the 1.5 million target is the right one. Just to be very clear, it is an incredibly stretching target, and that is partly because of the inheritance that we've picked up. As I said, housing supply now projected to dip below 200,000 homes a year. So we've got to get ourselves in these early years out of this real trough we're in and step up house building rates across the parliament. So we think the 1.5 is the right target. It's stretching, it's ambitious, but we think with the measures we put in place yesterday and more to come, we can achieve it.
I wanted to end with your view, the government view on the situation in the Middle East. Clearly tensions are very high and escalating overnight with a number of high-profile killings of a Hezbollah leader yesterday and a Hamas leader overnight. We discussed earlier with Alex Crawford about a bit of a vacuum of leadership from the US as we await to see who will be president from next year. What can the UK realistically do to prevent things bubbling over? And will the Prime Minister himself be travelling to the region anytime soon?
I don't know, in response to the last question, whether the Prime Minister has plans to. I know our Foreign Office ministers are engaged in a concerted effort to do what the UK can to reduce tensions in the region. You're right that they are at very high level. We've advised British nationals in Lebanon to leave now on commercial flights and for British nationals not to travel to the region. It's extremely tense. All the effort has to be on de-escalating the situation and getting both parties, the Israelis and the Lebanese, to engage with that US-led process on the diplomatic front to reduce tensions.
Matthew Pennycook, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Lots more still to come here on The Breakfast Show. We'll be going back to Southport to speak to a local church leader about how the community is coping after Monday's attack. We'll also speak to a former British tennis player on Andy Murray and Dan Evans' thrilling second-round win, once again saving some match points, delaying Andy Murray's retirement once again, hopefully for 3 or 4 more matches. He's into the quarterfinals now, I believe. We'll be right back.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling?
I am angry. Legal abortion! It is an anti-woman agenda.
2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Are you going to catch this killer?
We are doing everything we can.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
We're so excited.
Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that, but there are a lot of people who aren't.
It's not the winds people fear most here, it's the water. We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world. Do you truly believe what you're saying?
lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous.
Welcome back to Sky News Breakfast. Coming up, we'll be live back in Southport speaking to a local church leader about how the community there is coping. And later in the programme, we'll be catching up on all the latest Olympics action. But first, a reminder of all of the day's top stories. Leah's got those for us.
Thank you, Wilfred. Morning. Well, Hamas's top political leader has been killed in Iran. Iran says Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated in the capital, Tehran. Israel says it's killed a senior Hezbollah commander in a rare strike on the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Hezbollah has confirmed Fouad Shakur was in the building hit, but stopped short of saying if he's dead or alive. Thousands of people gathered at a vigil in Southport to pay tribute to the 3 girls killed during Monday's stabbing attack. Meanwhile, dozens of police officers have been injured during a clash with protesters outside a local mosque.
Leah, thank you. Right, let's get back out to Southport. Sarah Jane's there for us once again this morning with all of the very latest. SJ.
Thank you very much, Wilf. Yes, back in Southport this morning. It really was a day of two halves, as different as night and day. The day part of yesterday was about the victims. Where we're standing now is just in front of this sea of floral tributes that's replicated at the other end of the police cordon and, of course, in the town centre as well. People coming here to quietly reflect and remember the victims and their families. That replicated at the vigil at around 6 o'clock last night. And it was as that vigil came to a close, there was a shift in mood. And that's what I mean about the difference between day and night. The mood really shifted here in Southport, and it shifted quickly. Sky correspondent Ashna Hiranag is with me now because, Ashna, what we witnessed after that vigil on the streets here at Southport by no means represented what we'd seen throughout the rest of the day and how this community had come together to really put the victims and their families at the forefront of all of this.
I think that is what has shocked many people that live locally. It's important to say a lot of the people that were at that protest or demonstration yesterday, where we saw such ugly scenes and vicious scenes, certainly when it came to the emergency services, they bared the brunt of a lot of that, and so did the local people who live in that area. A lot of those people that were part of it were not from this local area. They were not from Merseyside even, or even the northwest region. And when we saw those clashing scenes, and as we can see from our pictures, you know, the debris that's now littering the floor over there.
Well, just yards from where we're standing round the corner, there are diggers, you know, picking up what remains of vehicles and the, you know, what's left over of those scenes.
It feels really uncomfortable for many people because we're only a few minutes walk between the two scenes, and the vigil was in town, so it's all very close. You can walk everywhere here in Southport, and they chose that to protest and have those scenes outside a mosque in part and largely, I think, fueled by social media speculation surrounding the suspect in this case. So much of the speculation has been wrong, and the police have been very quick to point that out, saying that our officers were trying our best to save lives and doing our best on Monday, and yet they were the ones that were facing those attacks yesterday. And also reflecting on the paramedics too, again, having a very emotional day. We watched as paramedics and ambulance services were holding hands and holding on to each other as they came to lay wreaths here, and to have them then face a very difficult evening is quite jarring for many people. It also is quite jarring because, as you say, an hour before that happened, thousands of people, crowds of people were present at that vigil, just present to mark that moment, many of them in quiet contemplation, some of them saying a prayer together, again holding hands. And the two moments were completely different and felt completely different. And I think for many people waking up today will feel disappointed in much of those evening scenes that went on late into the night.
Ashna, thank you. Yes, a lot of people saying that Southport have suffered two traumas this week, that attack on Monday and what unfolded here last night. Ashna Hiranag, thank you. I will bring you some pictures of that vigil. It passed off peacefully. A minute's silence was observed. Members of the community, hundreds turning out to remember the victims and their families. I spoke to a couple who lived just around the corner from where we are now, who had moved to Southport from the Midlands a year ago for what they described as a peaceful retirement. They've got their grandchildren visiting this week. And obviously the horror of Monday was one thing, but they said what unfolded after that vigil here on the streets that surround us was frightening for them as a family. And I think that was reflected by many of the residents we've been speaking to this morning. Well, I'm joined now by Captain Alison Hutchings, church leader of the Salvation Army here in Southport. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
You are very much at the heart of this community as the Salvation Army, providing support for those who need it most here. Can you talk to me about the reaction after Monday's attack?
Absolutely. I think like anyone in the town and in this region, it was just a sense of overwhelmed horror, shock, sadness. You know, I've got two young girls myself, and it's just heartbreaking. And I think that is just the general tone of the whole town.
Yeah, you feel it personally because you live here, and you feel it because of your role in the Salvation Army, which is to open your doors to everyone that needs it. There is no, discrimination or judgment at that door. You can come in, and it's a safe space for people in Southport. What have people been saying to you as they come into your centre, which is about half a mile from here?
Yeah, it's just down the road. I think people are... Some people are scared. Some people are saying, what do we do? How do we protect our children? We run toddler groups, and people are thinking, OK, can we still bring our children to these things? But then there's the sense of what can we do? How can we help? How can we continue? We're part of a wider Christian community, and we say, how can we continue to show love and support? This is what we're about. This is who we are as the Salvation Army, as the church and faith groups within Southport. How can we just support our people, stand shoulder to shoulder to people, and how can we, those people that come in through our doors now for a cup of coffee and for a chat, what can we do just to, we lend a listening ear, we're there for them. And I think that's what the people of Southport are about, we're standing shoulder to shoulder with people of our town.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to experience some of that community spirit spending the last few days here since that attack happened. It really is a strong sense of community and wanting to stand together in the face of this. You were at the vigil last night with your family, and as I was just saying to our correspondent Ashna, the mood changed really quickly last night after that vigil. Can you talk me through how you experienced it as a family?
Yeah, so we were at the vigil, and it was just that sense of shared humanity, this outpouring of grief, this coming together. How can we just show the respect and love for those families that have just so sadly been ripped apart? And so that was what the vigil was all about. Obviously then over a period of an hour or so it dispersed and people went their separate ways, but we went out for a coffee. But as we were just sat there having our coffee, we were then getting news on local social media and that of what was happening just half a mile down the road. And again, it was as if Southport was attacked for a second time. You know, people were just scared. I had messages from staff and volunteers at Salvation Army going, what do we do? We're scared. How, is there something we can do to help? Is it safe to come to work? And the mood was just like, this is a second attack, what are we going to do? But again, I think this morning, the people of Southport, I know my team at the Salvation Army are going to wake up with that resolve to say, OK, we are a community, we are going to stand together, we are going to just get through this together.
And as a woman of faith, to see a mosque attacked, there are many Muslim families that live in Southport.
Yeah.
What a frightening night for them.
Absolutely. I can't imagine what they are experiencing. My daughter, a friend of hers, lives just opposite the mosque, and I can't imagine the fear that community is facing. And our message is simply, you know, it's a shared people of faith, you know. We stand next to them as well. This isn't about faith, this isn't about politics. This is about a town that is grieving, who wants to show the world that we are a community who care for one another, not one that has people that come in and terrorise the town and enforce their political agenda on what should be a moment of shared grief and support.
Captain Alison Hutchins, thank you for your time this morning, and keep up the good work, because it's safe spaces like the Salvation Army that, you know, as we've spoken to people here throughout the course of the few days, they just want somewhere to go, someone to talk to, and somewhere to come together. Thank you for talking to us. Thank you. We will have more updates on this story in Southport throughout the morning for you. In the meantime, I'm going to hand back to the studio.
SJ, thank you. Some other stories to bring you up to date on. And landslides in southern India have now killed more than 150 people as rescue teams continue to search through the debris. Torrential rain has caused mud and water to rush through villages. Since about Tuesday in the state of Kerala, more than 300 rescuers have worked to free people trapped. And a temporary hospital has been set up to treat the injured. Former BBC presenter Hugh Edwards is due to appear in court, charged with making indecent images of children. The 62-year-old is alleged to have committed 3 offences between December 2020 and April 2022. The broadcaster is accused of having had 37 photographs on WhatsApp, including 6 of the most serious type. And 2 people have been killed after a helicopter crashed into a farm building in Ireland. The crash happened yesterday afternoon at a farm in County Westmeath. The Irish Air Accidents Investigation Unit has been sent to the site to inspect. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has vowed to detain opposition leaders as protests continue over the country's disputed election results. Protesters held marches on Tuesday demanding the president acknowledged that he lost the vote. The government says the protests are an attempted coup.
Now, rising workplace sickness is costing the UK economy billions of pounds every year. New analysis shows the hidden cost of employee illness has risen by £30 billion since 2018. Our correspondent Rachel Venables joins me now to discuss all of this. So, Rachel, quite a significant increase in this data.
Really is, yeah. This is just since 2018 to 2023. So in 5 years, workplace sickness is costing the UK economy, it's thought, around £30 billion extra. So that's a really significant jump. It's a really significant dent on the economy. But really interestingly, when you look at the research, which has come from this IPPR, the Institute of Public Policy Research, it's a commission on health and prosperity, they found that the vast majority of that £30 billion, actually some 25 billion of it, actually comes from people who go to work anyway while being sick, which is something that maybe would fly in the face of what you might expect. I think we've all been guilty of feeling a bit under the weather and going into work anyway. But they found that actually that really limits prosperity, because it means people aren't recovering, they take more time to get better. That means when they're working, they're at work, they're not working as hard as they could be. They also spread the illness around potentially, and they also risk their health in the future. So it all culminates. And really this report is about saying that there needs to be a better understanding of the link between health and wealth and a better work-life balance when it comes to these businesses, supporting businesses, they say, that support the health of their employees, and also an understanding of those businesses that do the opposite as well.
I mean, that is a really interesting detail, 25 of the 30 increase being that, but it's increased by 30 since 2018. From what level to what level?
Since 2018, absolutely. So that's what we've seen, is this big jump since 2018. The total, as I've said already, is £30 billion. And this report looks at a huge number of different factors when it comes to the health of the public and the way that impacts the public purse. Talking about things like poor work culture, financial insecurity and the limited access to sick pay as well. All of these have a real impact.
Rachel, great stuff. Thanks so much. Lots more still to come here on The Breakfast Show. Andy Murray's career continues with another thrilling win at the Olympics. We'll speak to former British tennis player Dan Lobb next.
They've pushed the protesters further back here. There's around 200 or 300 still remaining.
I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky News' West of England correspondent.
This van goes onto the streets of Plymouth 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
These facilities at the moment are a lifesaver. It's all we've got.
From fishing communities to bustling cities, we spend every day reporting from across the region, hearing from people who have real stories.
I'm gonna have nowhere to live for about 3 or 4 months.
There are still people inside the properties here. They're coming from the epicentre of what is now a global health pandemic.
We were seeing and speaking to young women who were selling themselves right on the high street. It was desperately sad, and the fact it was happening right in the heart of this community.
Before Brexit, these oysters were being exported to the EU, but the trade stopped overnight.
What's your feeling about the future then?
Bleak. Might all be finished, I don't know.
Welcome back. Well, we'll be speaking to former British tennis player Dan Lobb in just a minute. But before that, let's have a look at the latest action for Team GB in the Olympics. Well, last night, Andy Murray delayed his retirement from tennis for at least one more match. He and Dan Evans are through to the quarter-finals of the men's doubles. They saved a couple more match points once again as well. The swimming quartet of James Guy, Tom Dean, Matt Richards and Duncan Scott won gold in the men's 4x200 metres relay freestyle, retaining their title from Tokyo 3 years ago. Nathan Hales secured a gold medal in the men's trap shooting final and achieved an Olympic record while doing it. The 28-year-old hit 48 out of 50 targets to break the previous record of 43. Wow, he smashed the record. the first shooting medal for Team GB at the Paris Olympics. And then the US's Simone Biles won her 5th Olympic gold medal after leading her team to victory in the women's gymnastic team final. There was heartbreak, though, for Team GB as they narrowly missed out on a medal, coming 4th, matching what the men did, alas, the day before as well. Well, let's discuss the tennis in particular with former British tennis player Dan Lobb. Dan, great to have you with us. Murray and Evans, they did it again. Saved some match points and then scraped through.
Yeah, for the second time in a row, I was in disbelief, which is stupid, really, because it's Andy Murray on court, isn't it? And we should know better by now. But yeah, just another amazing performance from those two. And typical Andy, isn't it? Just coming back from the brink and getting through somehow.
And I mean, what do you make of their chances from here? We keep saying he's delayed retirement for one more match. Should we be saying, you know, he's one step closer to another gold medal, or is that going to be fateful if we start talking about it that way?
Oh, it's hard not to, though, isn't it, Wilfred? I think, yeah, why not? They've got to win one more match, and then they'll be guaranteed a bronze medal match after that if they make the semi-finals. The thing about Andy is, even though this is his last ever tournament, he's gone into it expecting to do well. And he's a 2-time Olympic champion. He won silver in the mixed doubles. He knows what it takes to be an Olympic champion. And, you know, he's got a great wingman in Dan Evans, who's playing unbelievably well under the most unique of situations for him. And so, yeah, why not? Let's get excited about this. There's every possibility.
Hey, Dan, it's Leah here. Morning to you.
Hi, morning.
Talking about that retirement, Andy Murray has such a long and lustrous career. I wondered what your favourite Murray moment has been. Mine has to be the mixed doubles with Serena Williams in 2019. He's always been such a staunch supporter of women's sport, hasn't he?
Completely, and we've seen those clips of him in press conferences correcting the journalists when they've mentioned a record that he's been part of or broken, and he's corrected them by saying, well, yeah, on the male side, not on the female side. And so he's always been very inclusive. Remember, he took on Amelie Mauresmo as a coach when I don't think any other top male player would even consider doing that. So he's been a fantastic advocate for women's tennis and hugely inclusive and supportive of everybody in the support in the game. And I think actually that might give us a clue as to what's going to be, what his life's going to look like after he does hang up the rackets. He's going to be involved in the game in some way. I don't think we'll see him coaching. We won't see him traveling on the tour. Pretty sure we won't see him in the commentary booth either, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if he has a big role to play with youngsters coming up into the sport and maybe even focused in Scotland. But he's got this wonderful legacy, and like you say, I think he's been just a fantastic ambassador, perhaps more off court sometimes than on court. His antics on court haven't always gone down too well. But yeah, he's just an incredible competitor.
A legacy that we hope is not completed yet, as we've been discussing. Talk us through the way in which the doubles attracts the biggest names when it comes to the Olympics, perhaps more than during the tour the rest of the year, because there are some thrilling pairings there. Alcaraz and Nadal. I mean, you almost want them to win. Obviously, we don't. We want Murray and Evans. But it's pretty exciting, some of the pairings that come together.
Well, the Olympic Committee have got their fingers crossed because there is that possibility of Alcaraz and Nadal against Evans and Murray in the final for gold. And look, it's the chance of winning a gold medal. It's as simple as that. That's why you see a lot of the top name players not only play doubles, but also mixed doubles if they do have the opportunity. They are fully aware of just what the Olympic movement means in the world of sport. Tennis is just one sport, and Andy's a good example of this, actually. But all the top players have a huge amount of respect for all the other athletes taking part in the Olympic Games. I think most of them see it as a great honour. And yeah, if they have a chance of winning a gold medal on the doubles court or the mixed doubles court, then they'll take it. It's about grasping these opportunities, and that's something that most of the top players do and have done through their careers.
Dan Lobb, thanks so much for joining us. Good luck to Andy Murray and Dan Evans from here. Now, the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, has announced an overhaul of the planning system to build 1.5 million homes over the next 5 years. The Housing Minister, Matthew Pennycook, told Sky News that houses could be built on Greenbelt if the local authorities cannot release suitable land elsewhere. Let's get more on this with Mari. Mari, this is a big focus for the new government, and they're really kind of getting to work on it. It's interesting to hear Pennycook kind of not want to push that aspect of the Greenbelt permissions, almost as if it might attract a bit of heat. But it's very central to this these reforms they're announcing.
It is, and I think you're absolutely right. He doesn't want to draw attention to that, but he admitted that that is a possibility. So local authorities could see themselves forced to release Greenbelt land if there is no other option. And I think they are trying to move away from that. They don't want people to get too stressed about that, especially in certain seats where they've won them from the Tories. There might be some local opposition. And so, you know, for now, things are going OK. Local support or local opposition is a really big problem for governments when it comes to housing. And therefore, I think depending on how much Greenbelt land needs to be released, that will really be the test for Labour. They're saying brownfield first, then what they call grey belt, which is Greenbelt land, but essentially it's not actually green, and then green as a last resort. The targets are ambitious. You questioned him about whether they were ambitious enough. He essentially said they were stretching but actually achievable, and I think that's what they want to make sure that they can do, is not overpromise and underdeliver. They would rather overdeliver and underpromise.
Yeah, 1.5 million. Still unclear if they're going to be completed homes.
No, he said they'd be started in this Parliament, so I don't think 1.5 million will be built by the end of this Parliament.
Well, we shall see if it placates voters' desires there, offset against some of those local pressures. Mari, great stuff. Thanks so much. Well, Mari, Leah and I and SJ and the team in the Middle East will be back after this short break with all the day's top stories. Good morning. It's 8 o'clock coming up on today's show. The political leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, has been killed in Tehran.
I'll tell you why people going into work when they're unwell is costing the economy.
And we'll speak to former Tory Chancellor and Foreign Secretary Lord Hammond in the next few minutes.
It's Wednesday, the 31st of July. Your headlines. Iran says the Hamas political leader of the Gazan armed group has been assassinated.
Hamas says the killing was a treacherous Zionist raid on his residence.
And here in Southport, thousands of people gathered to remember the 3 young girls killed in an attack on a holiday club. And dozens of police officers were injured during a clash with protesters outside a mosque last night. This is after the Home Secretary urged people not to spread false information about the suspect.
Very good morning to you. We begin with breaking news. The political leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, has been killed in Tehran. Iran's Revolutionary Guard says he was assassinated at his residence in the Iranian capital, and the cause of his death is under investigation. Hamas said Haniyeh was killed alongside one of his bodyguards. Well, we're joined now by international correspondent John Sparks. He's in Jerusalem for us this morning. John, very good morning to you once again. Tell us exactly who he was and how significant it is that he's been assassinated in Iran, of course, as well.
Yeah, good morning, Wilfred. It's massively significant. I mean, this is a huge escalation in an expanding regional war. I think that's the way to see it. I think that the diplomats who have been busy over the last few weeks trying to keep a lid on things in the region will not have contemplated something like this. It's totally out of the parameters of what we have seen, which are localized conflicts, nasty conflicts, but localized conflicts in Gaza and in and around the Lebanese border. In the last 24 hours, we've seen the killing of 2 senior leaders of Iran-backed groups. The first, Fuad Shakur, senior Hezbollah commander. The Israelis say they eliminated him when they bombed his residence, we believe, or a building in South Beirut. The Israelis say he is responsible for the attack on Majd al-Shams in Golan Heights this morning. The second attack on Ismail Haniyeh, the top leader, certainly the top political leader in Hamas, one of the top leaders of that organization. He was actually last seen yesterday in Tehran. He was there for the inauguration of the new Iranian president. The Iranians have just posted pictures of Haniyeh meeting with the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei. They've just put that up. He was based in Qatar, however. He's been based in Qatar since 2017. A tough talking character. He was leading the negotiations with the Israelis on a ceasefire, leading the negotiations on a hostage prisoner exchange. But the Israelis, it seems, have taken out their main counterpart in those negotiations. They haven't said anything about it. The Israelis haven't commented. They rarely do, but I don't think there's much doubt that they have authored this assassination. The Iranian Revolutionary Guards, they're the main military faction in Iran. They said that they will investigate what has happened. They say they don't know what has happened, but we believe there was some sort of attack in a residence in central Tehran, and clearly that is embarrassing for them. I think this incident plunges us into the unknown. The Iranians are likely to see this as an act of war. I can't see any other way that they would see it. A former commander from the Revolutionary Guards has been quoted saying that Israel will pay a heavy price for this. I don't think that will come as a surprise to anyone, but it takes us into the unknown. This conflict deepening, this conflict broadening, I think the risks for everybody are increasing.
John, I want to talk about the spat, more than the spat, with Hezbollah in a moment, but specifically what this might do with Iran. And when we've seen clashes between Israel and Iran during this conflict, and we've seen very tough talk about likely retaliation as well, specifically from the Iranians, which has been followed through to an extent, but almost it seems from afar as if with the aim of trying to make sure things don't bubble over completely. Is this so humiliating for Iran that this happened on their doorstep immediately after the inauguration of their new president, that it changes the considerations for them?
I think it does. Yeah, I think it does. I mean, it is a huge embarrassment for them, a huge breach in their own security to have someone like Haniyeh assassinated in the capital when he is there for the inauguration of their president. I think it plunges that relationship into a new phase, into the unknown. In a sense, the relationship with Iran mirrored the one with Hezbollah. There have been attempts on both sides not to tip the situation into all-out war. There's been a calculation to do that all along. And I think, that is the question. It's very hard to measure at the moment. But how are the Iranians going to react? We're talking also about the groups that they back in the region. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, groups in Iran and Syria as well, the Houthis in Yemen. The Iranians are well dug in. They've got proxies who are well armed. So, I mean, the threat is real. The threat is large. The Iranians now will be deciding how to use it. And we know that the Supreme Leader has called a security meeting in Tehran this morning. Very rarely does this happen. I think that is a reflection, a special cabinet meeting. I think it is a reflection of the seriousness of which they regard this assassination.
And finally, John, what is the latest with Hezbollah?
With Hezbollah, good question. I mean, our attention has been shifted, hasn't it? But yes, a senior commander has been, in the words of the Israelis, has been eliminated, goes by various names, one of them being Fuad Shukr. He's got a bounty on his head from the Americans for his involvement in a previous bombing. We can't expect a response from Hezbollah. They have vowed to respond. I don't think there's any doubt that they will. We just don't know at this stage what they're going to do. So on that border, things are tense. And, Hezbollah are well armed. They have been well armed by the Iranians. They're far more powerful, better equipped. They have more men on the ground than Hamas, for example. They represent a far greater threat than Hamas. So, yes, we're talking about Haniyeh, we're talking about Iran at the moment. Hezbollah, however, they represent a potent threat to Israel.
John Sparks, as ever, thanks so much, live for us in Jerusalem. Let's go live now to Southport, where Sarah Jane has the latest after Monday's stabbing attack for us. SJ.
Well, thank you. Thousands of people gathered in the centre of Southport last night at a vigil to pay tribute to the 3 young girls killed in Monday's knife attack. But there were violent scenes later in the evening, protesters clashing with police outside the local mosque. We'll have more on that in just a moment. But first, our Chief North of England correspondent Greg Milam takes us through what we know about the victims so far.
The faces of 3 young girls who all went to dance and never came home. 6-year-old BB King, 7-year-old Elsie Stancombe and 9-year-old Alice Aguiar. BB's family said no words could describe their devastation. Elsie's school called her loving and bright, a kind and caring friend. Alice's family said she would always be their princess. A number of other children and adults remain critically ill after what police called a ferocious attack minutes before the Taylor Swift-themed dance event was due to end. Leanne Lucas was one of the organisers of that event. She ran her own company, teaching children about their well-being through dance. She is one of those in hospital.
How many more children, Prime Minister? Are we going to do something?
There was some heckling as the Prime Minister came to see the scene for himself, a reflection of the horror that has swept far beyond this community.
What, you going to stand up for our children?
Today is not the time for politics. Today is the time to focus entirely on the families who are going through such pain and grief.
And a response too from Taylor Swift herself. The horror of yesterday's attack, she wrote, washing over her continuously. These were just little kids at a dance class. I am at a complete loss for how to ever convey my sympathies to these families. A fundraiser set up by fans of the star has now raised hundreds of thousands of pounds. And from the community, the sympathy and the flowers keep on coming. The shock, the disbelief, is palpable. We're learning more about the awful events, including how the man who owned the building tried to stop the attacker. His wife told Sky News he saw the man with a child on the floor. He tried to grab the knife, but was himself stabbed. All he wanted to do, she said, was help that child, but he wasn't able to. There is so much for this community to process.
It is the hardest thing that it's children, you know, the innocence and, you know, the Taylor Swift connection, joy, happiness, laughter on the first day of the, you know, real summer holidays, then going to the screams and the silence.
The 17-year-old remains in custody on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. Sky News spoke to a former neighbour in Cardiff, where he was born, who said he was from a normal and lovely family and his mother was a good mum. This is an attack that has left its mark on even those used to dealing with the most awful of scenes. We can only imagine how long the scars will last for those who never thought this sort of horror could happen where they call home. Greg Milam, Sky News, Southport.
Well, as this community reels from Monday's events, protests erupted on the streets of Southport last night. Police clashing with rioters believed to be members of the English Defence League who gathered outside the local mosque. Police say there has been online speculation about the identity of the suspect they have in custody, and some people are using it to engage in disorder. Officers repeated that the suspect was born in the UK and that the speculation was unhelpful. Sky's Charlotte Leeming has this report.
Disorder on the streets of Southport, with riot police deployed after violence erupted outside a mosque. Police vehicles were set alight and projectiles thrown at officers. The chaos coming just hours after the Home Secretary said communities must be given time to heal and that it's extremely important people don't share dangerous disinformation online. Merseyside police condemned the behaviour, saying it started when a large group of people, who some believe are supporters of the English Defence League, threw items at the mosque. In a statement, the force said it's sickening to see this happening within a community that has been devastated by the tragic loss of 3 lives. The community came together in their hundreds, bound by shock, loss and grief. This was an outpouring of love and support. The turnout showed the scale of this tragedy. In front of a silent crowd, the Mayor of Sefton placed some flowers in the Town Hall gardens.
If anybody needs anything, they need to just cry out for us to help them. My background actually is child bereavement counsellor, so I know the effects it can have. The ripple effects last for years, but within all the family, all the community. So yeah, we have to be strong for each other.
After a minute's silence, people queued up to leave cards, flowers and soft toys, united in their mourning and still in shock at the devastating events in their hometown.
Your heart obviously just goes out to everyone that's involved in this, and I don't know, you hold yours a little bit tighter, don't you? You never want to be that person that's in that situation, what these poor families are going through at the moment, so we just wanted to come and show our respects, really.
It is really a caring place. People help each other, and I feel so many just wanted to come and be part of it.
This is what's going to get people through. This community support. I really believe that this right here now, what we're seeing, is what's going to get Southport through.
As this community navigates its future after such a major trauma, many say they'll get through it together. Charlotte Leeming, Sky News, Southport.
Much more throughout the morning here from Southport as we reflect on the events on the streets here of Southport last night. Those violent scenes, 22 police officers we know were injured, that being confirmed by Merseyside police. But also more on the victims of Monday's attack. Those 3 little girls, of course, losing their lives. 5 children, we understand, are still in a critical condition alongside 2 adults. We'll continue to reflect what's happening here in Southport throughout the morning. For now, though, back to the studio.
SJ, thanks so much for that. Sarah Jane there in Southport for us. Let's get now the Conservative point of view on stories that have been taking the headlines this morning, including the government's proposals to build houses, including on greenbelts. The former Chancellor, Lord Hammond, is here with me now. A very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. Is it unreservedly a good thing for the economy, even if it annoys some local groups or if houses end up being unattractive or whatever, to build a lot more houses?
Yeah, I mean, there are many reasons why we need more homes built. There's a lot of social pressure for more housing, but we've also got an urgent economic need to regenerate the house building sector. But I think it's not just about planning reform. You can't build houses without builders. And if the government thinks relaxing the planning rules while tightening the migration rules is going to get houses built, I think they're going to have another thing coming.
In terms of this debate about Greenbelt versus not, might annoy some Tory seats, wasn't going to happen in a Tory government. Labour's got a big majority. They're doing it early in the Parliament. Is there truth to that? Is there a lot of politics that have held back the Tories from doing enough in this area?
Yeah, there's been a lot of politics for sure. There are a lot of Conservative supporters and indeed others, not just Conservatives, who are very much opposed to development in their own backyards. Many of them understand the principle that we need to build homes somewhere, and somehow this logjam has to be broken. And I'm afraid that the last Communities Secretary decided to bow out from that debate and allow the NIMBYs to temporarily own the pitch.
You mentioned migration there. This is sort of jumping around my order list a little bit, but clearly another big item on the agenda for the new government will be the EU renegotiation next year. To what extent could that be a game changer for the economy? And if you were leading that, what would you do?
Well, look, just to go back to the immigration thing, I think we have to start to have a clear division in our thinking about immigration between long-term immigration for settlement and short-term immigration for work. The needs of the economy, as our population ages, will increasingly require us to allow people to come here to work, but not to settle, to work for short periods and then to return home. And I think the sooner we can separate those two things in people's minds, the better, because without access to labour, as the population ages and the workforce starts to decline, we're either going to get if we don't have access to labour, we will get worse off. It's as simple as that.
Is the EU renegotiation part of that or separate to that?
So I think I hope that the result of the discussions that the new government will have with the EU will be a gradual thawing in relations. I think it's unrealistic to think that we're going to get dramatic change in the relationship between the UK and the EU. The wounds are still too raw and the sensitivity is still too great on both sides. And I think the Europeans do not yet have a sense that there is a broad consensus in the UK for a closer relationship with the EU. I think that will come in time, but it's probably a little early yet.
I wanted to touch on the developments this week between the Chancellor and the Shadow Chancellor, and we'll get into some of the details of what has been announced in a moment. But before that, I just wanted to play you a clip of the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, on the show yesterday when I asked her whether she'd go as far as calling Jeremy Hunt a liar.
Yeah.
Jeremy Hunt covered up from the House of Commons and from the country the true state of the public finances. He did that knowingly and deliberately.
So he's a liar? If he covered something up knowingly, he's a liar?
He lied, and they lied during the election campaign about the state of the public finances.
What did you make of the extent of that?
Well, firstly, I mean, Labour's won a huge victory, and, you know, the first golden rule is usually magnanimity in victory. I don't really see the point of attacking the outgoing Chancellor unless Rachel Reeves is preparing the pitch for some manifesto commitment-breaking tax increases in October. But the way our budget system works is the Chancellor produces a budget with the published advice of the OBR about the implications of that budget, and that is then the framework for the year. So the current year we're in has a budget framework. This is how much we expect to spend, this is how much we expect to raise. There isn't, as far as I'm aware, any mechanism by which that is regularly updated to Parliament. Now, if Rachel Reeves is suggesting that she's perhaps going to introduce a mechanism by which the Chancellor has to sort of quarterly update their forecasts for the current year to Parliament. That would be a very significant and interesting innovation, and I would advise her to think very, very carefully before she makes such a commitment.
Would it deliver transparency? What at the cost of tying the Chancellor's hands a bit?
The problem is what happens in year is dynamic. You have a good, the figures are published, so they are monthly figures on borrowing, on tax receipts, and so on are published. But you have good months and you have bad months. You have months when you get a piece of bad news, like interest rate forecasts are up, therefore the cost of servicing our debt is going to be higher. Then you may get 2 or 3 months later, you may get a piece of good news, interest rates have gone down, for example. Reforecasting in year every time there's a change to anything, I'm not sure would be helpful to transparency of the process overall. The way it works at the moment, the Chancellor, of course, is accountable for the outcome of his previous budget when he stands up at the dispatch box with his next budget.
So it sounds like in terms of the actual word lie, you felt that was...
I think it was too strong. It was too strong.
In terms of what's to come, I mean, again, in that interview yesterday, the Chancellor reiterated she wouldn't break the core pledge, VAT, income tax and national insurance contribution. What does that leave? And which of the taxes left would you put up in a way that is least damaging to the economy? Well,
it leaves a huge range of things, but some of which I suspect she won't tackle, like fuel duty, for example. There's potentially a huge amount of money in fuel duty, but I suspect the politics will keep her away from that. The problem Rachel Reeves has got is that she's boxed herself in by ruling out changes to the big taxes, and that will leave her looking at secondary taxes like inheritance tax and capital gains tax. And I think everybody expects that an incoming Labour government will make some changes in those areas. So it's not about don't touch capital gains tax or inheritance tax, but it is about what she does and how, because her central agenda is generating economic growth and investment in the economy. And she's absolutely right in her analysis that there is no other solution to Britain's long-term economic challenges than economic growth and productivity. And she's got to be very, very careful, because the areas where she will be looking, like capital gains tax, will have a very direct impact on the sentiment of entrepreneurs and investors. So I don't think there are any no-go areas, but I think she's going to have to tread extremely lightly and carefully around the taxes that impact on investment and entrepreneurship.
So if there'd been no manifesto pledges, what would you put up tax in the autumn, and which one would you put up? Was it a mistake to do as many NIC cuts as the last government did?
Well, NIC is one of the options, of course, to rebalance the public finances, and she's ruled that out. So, it was a choice the last government made, and a choice
was it a mistake of the last government?
Well, it's a choice the current government has endorsed. So that's the way it is, and it was a deliberate choice to focus reductions in tax on people who are in work, and that's what national insurance contribution payers are. So there would have been a range of options across income tax, national insurance, VAT, if she hadn't ruled them out. Because they're very big taxes, very small adjustments can make quite a big change in revenue. The problem with the more minor taxes is that you tend to have to make quite big changes to get any revenue out of them.
We know who all the runners and riders are for the Tory leadership race. Is the party in good hands, whoever wins?
Well, look, the issue...
There's not an affirmative there.
No, well, let me explain my thinking about this. Labour's won a very significant electoral victory with actually quite a modest share of the vote. And they've done it by pitching to the middle ground in English politics across a very broad swathe of constituencies. They haven't said, we can't send our message to people in the south or people in the Midlands or whatever. They've pitched across the board in a very successful strategy. And if the Tory party wants to come back to overturn what is a large majority in terms of parliamentary seats, but a small margin in terms, relatively small margin in terms of percentage of popular vote, the Tory party has to adopt the same strategy. It has to be in that middle ground. It has to be competing with Labour on economic competence, management of public finances, all areas where, until very recently, the Tory party always scored very highly, but the events of the last few years have damaged the brand. We've got to rebuild that brand, and we can only do it from the centre of politics. So it's very important that the Tory party chooses a leader that is committed to that strategy, to the centre ground of politics.
So are there certain candidates that you hope will not win this Tory race?
I think what we're going to hear messaging from all the candidates. Now, Priti Patel, for example, who has traditionally been thought of as a candidate on the right of the party, has gone out of her way to say that the party needs a unity candidate. It needs to be, it needs to find that centre ground again and pull all the strands of thinking in the party together, which is a very positive message. So we will hear from all the candidates, and I, like every other member of the Conservative Party, will make up my mind.
Which you haven't done yet.
Which I haven't done yet.
Two other very quick questions. Bank of England tomorrow, talk of possible rate cut. I mean, I guess suggests the election could have come later.
Well, I'm pretty sure we will get rate cuts this year, and therefore I've never quite understood why the previous Prime Minister decided to go early to the country when I think there would have been an increasingly good economic story. Rate cuts means mortgage cuts for people, and that matters to voters. Whether the Bank of England will cut as early as this week, I'm not so sure. Although the headline rate of inflation is now looks relatively stable at 2%, services are still rising at quite an alarming rate, the cost of services, and that's being driven by wage increases that are way above the rate of inflation. And the Bank of England will be worrying that these wage increases are going to feed back into a spiral that will start to push prices back up again. So I think there's quite likely to be a majority on the MPC for waiting a little bit longer. And of course, Rachel Reeves this week has given a boost to those concerns by accepting the public sector pay review body settlements in full, which, you know, never mind the rights and wrongs of it, is a boost to pay inflation in the UK, and is likely to mean that pay settlements generally across the board move to a higher level.
Just a quick final question with your other former job title in mind as former Foreign Secretary. The situation in the Middle East is clearly incredibly tense at the moment. Yeah. I was talking with Alex Crawford, our reporter in Beirut earlier, about the sort of semi-vacuum of US leadership after President Biden decided not to seek re-election. What can the UK do? What can David Lammy and Keir Starmer realistically do to try and keep tensions in check?
Well, we can. The UK's influence is limited now, as we're no longer members of the European Union. The European Union has a bit more influence, and I think the right strategy for the UK is to collaborate with the EU in trying to bring a European voice to bear on events in the Middle East. But I think we have to be realistic. We have limited influence. Collectively, we have limited influence. The US can be a restraining factor on Israel. Other players in the Middle East can be a restraining factor on other participants in this growing conflict. But I hope that what we're seeing is, to some extent, a bit of play acting, you know, tit for tat. But nobody, I think, among the principal participants actually wants a flare-up into full-scale war at the moment. The danger is more one of miscalculation leading to an expansion into a full-scale war by accident.
Lord Hammond, always great to catch up. Thanks so much.
Thank
you. The former Foreign Secretary, former Chancellor, Philip Hammond there. Lots more still to come here on The Breakfast Show. We'll have more on the situation in the Middle East and what it could mean for prospects of a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas, and the hidden cost of workplace sickness. We'll discuss.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, you know, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Are you going to catch this killer?
We are doing everything we can.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
I'm so excited.
Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that, but there are a lot of people who aren't.
It's not the winds people fear most here, it's the water. We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world. Do you truly believe what you're saying?
A lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous.
Welcome back to Breakfast. Well, still to come, we'll be looking at another big day for Team GB ahead in Paris. But first, let's cross back to Sarah Jane in Southport with the latest following Monday's stabbing attack. SJ.
Thank you very much, Wilf. A real sense of calm here on the streets of Southport this morning. We're back at the scene of that horrendous stabbing attack at a community centre just behind me. And it was a really difficult day yesterday for so many reasons, a real emotional day for the community just coming to terms or trying to come to terms with what unfolded on their doorstep on Monday. And the mood really shifted throughout the day. We saw the Prime Minister visit and be heckled by a small number of people here where the floral tributes are. And then there was a vigil in the evening at about 6 o'clock that passed off peacefully. A minute's silence was held, remembering those 3 young girls who lost their lives and the other victims involved in this and their families. The ripple effect in this community is huge. And it was after the vigil that things took a turn. There was a clear mark in the day. For me, I felt it. I felt the mood shift standing here. And there were large groups of people roaming the streets around us, and they congregated outside the local mosque. And that's where the trouble started. Some really violent and horrible scenes here on the streets of Southport. I was speaking to a local resident here who said it feels like Southport has gone through 2 traumas this week. We can go to our correspondent Ashna Huranag, who is outside the mosque where the violence broke out last night. And Ashna, we've seen the clean-up operation in Southport this morning, diggers coming in to move burned vehicles. The scale of this, you know, was something perhaps that people didn't expect, even though they knew that the mood had shifted and anger was starting to be felt here.
It has been an extraordinary morning. I mean, if last night we saw the very, very worst of humanity, as many people have been saying this morning we've very much seen the best, because so many people that live in these local houses have been part of this clean-up operation. There was masonry and bricks scattered around the floor, lots of glass, and lots of people have been borrowing brooms from neighbouring communities, and lots of local businesses too have come out to help. But someone who knows better than I do, because he was here since the very early hours of this morning, is David Burgess, of what's been going on. David, you live nearby.
Yeah.
Tell me what you saw last night, but also this morning's efforts are extraordinary to witness.
Yeah, so what I saw last night was absolutely appalling, and the people that came to do this weren't from Southport. They actually was an organised gang of thugs, because one of the person I know, he said when they went down the alleyway, they had a change of clothes ready for them, and they weren't from round here. They had different accents. They were from Lytham, from Manchester, from Liverpool, where my hometown. And it was devastating, and it's kind of taken away from actually what's gone on, which is the tragedy of those deaths, and obviously the other people who are suffering with the long-term effects of what happened. But as you can see behind me, there's quite a few people who have gone now. But as a local community, we just got together. I was here from 6:30 this morning because I woke up and just thought, I'm going to go and do my bit, and then borrowed this broom from one of the people who was outside. I just wanted to do my bit, and then we've probably cleaned this in about less than 2 hours. And there were some local businesses that came out, like Max Henshaw, Scott Landscape, RJ Bain Construction, all the local communities, and people just get together. And then this is what it's about. This is what Southport is actually about. It's not about what went on yesterday. And also, I want everybody to keep in memory that this is about the girls and the tragedy which has happened. Don't make it about this. This isn't Southport. This isn't the community. This is the community. This is what Southport's like. And people just need to be, just love each other that bit more. You know, hate, just violence, just creates more hate. It's like love thy neighbour. Just really get together as a community and sort it out. You know, there's a little girl there, you know, coming out to help out. You know, it's just the community just gets together, and it's so sad that this has happened in this small town, literally the day after the tragedy, and it's just appalling.
I'm very, very grateful that you took the time to speak to us today, and I'm sure people in the local area are even more grateful that you're one of those, well, I'd say 50 or so people that came to a bit more.
Probably more than that, yeah.
Maybe a bit more. It's been really impressive to witness.
Much, guys.
I'm really grateful. Thank you, David. Look, it has been, as I say, extraordinary to witness such an effort. The council got here, I'd say, about half an hour to an hour ago, assisting in much of this clean-up operation. David mentioned it there. Loads of local businesses part of this effort too. But also, as you might have just seen, a little girl clutching a dustpan and brush, just doing her bit. And I don't know if you saw, but David's hands were blackened because so much of the debris here was just filthy. And with a little bit of community support and community spirit, they've really returned it back to normal. Really a stark contrast to what we saw very late last night.
Ashna, thank you. Yes, that community effort this morning, very much the community that you and I have experienced since being in Southport for the last 48 hours, and many residents that I've spoken to here on the streets at this early hour of the morning, coming to lay floral tributes or walking their dog on their way to work, has said that is not what they want Southport to be known for. Those scenes on the streets last night, that is not how Southport is reacting to Monday. Southport is very much coming together to remember the victims and support the families and local community, and many of them asking why police were attacked last night, the very people that rushed to the scene here on Monday to confront the alleged attacker and take him into custody. We know that 39 patients in total, according to North West Ambulance, were treated last night, all of which were police officers, 27 of them taken to hospital, 12 treated and discharged at the scene, 8 sustaining serious injuries, including fractures, lacerations and suspected broken nose and concussion. We'll continue to follow the story here in Southport throughout the morning and the course of the day on Sky News. But right now, Wilf, I'll hand back to you.
Ashek, thanks so much. We're going to return now to our other top story of the day, the news that the political leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, has been killed in Tehran. Iran's Revolutionary Guards say he was assassinated in the Iranian capital. The cause of his death is under investigation. Joining me now is Nimrod Goren, who's a senior fellow for Israeli affairs at the Middle East Institute. Thank you so much for joining us. How significant is it that he's been killed?
It's very significant. Okay, Israel has made clear that it will go after all of those Hamas leaders and activists who were involved in anything happening in October 7th. Until now, it was mostly going after those engaged in direct military action. Now it's also going after the Hamas more political leadership. As one of the goals of the war from Israeli side is to make sure that Hamas will not be in a position to govern anymore either the Gaza Strip or Palestinian politics. It's also an issue of timing and the proximity of what happened last night in Beirut in terms of the Israel-Hezbollah confrontation. Those two things together definitely send a signal and reshape regional realities in a way that is not yet clear.
How provocative or perhaps opportune was it that he was killed whilst he was in Tehran?
I think first it's interesting to note in which countries he was not killed, because over the last years, I think Haniyeh spent lots of time in Doha, in Qatar. Recently was also quite a bit of time spending in Turkey. Those are countries in which Israel did not want to operate. So first, I think there is an operational opportunity, but also a message, because those two killings yesterday and this morning, both in Tehran, in Beirut, together with what happened in Iraq with a possible American strike there overnight, definitely show the linkage between the different components of the Iranian axis and the capability of Israel and its most significant ally in the US, with whatever coordination was there around these events, to go after the leadership and try to change the status quo.
You think the US supports these two high-profile assassinations?
What happened with Haniyeh is that Israel did not yet take responsibility officially, so there was no statement by the US on whatever Israel did or did not do. On Hezbollah, on yesterday, there were already statements coming from Kamala Harris about Israel's right to self-defend against that attack. So there seemingly is a backing from the Americans to such Israeli operation, although the American push, as we saw during Netanyahu's visit to Washington just last week, is prioritizing reaching a ceasefire and hostage release deal between Israel and Hamas, because that's the thing that can strategically reshape the reality. Until we don't get, let's say, rid of the hostage issue and the war problem, all other fronts are linked to that. So therefore, the sequence is now containing this escalation, making sure it doesn't lead to a full-fledged war, and putting more pressure also on the Israeli leadership to go ahead and seal the deal of hostage release and ceasefire in Gaza.
Is the prospect of a ceasefire deal realistic in the short term, given the week's events?
What we heard in Washington last week was a very positive American framing of it's as close as we ever got since November, since the last deal. But on the ground, talks did not seem to be progressing. There was a meeting between the mediators and the Israeli head of Mossad in Rome. Israel delivered its positions. The vibe wasn't as if these positions really enabled progress. There's a lot of criticism in Israel, in the domestic scene, about Netanyahu for not being committed politically to actually going ahead with this deal, the majority of the Israeli public support. So even before these events, it didn't seem as if we're on the brink of reaching a deal. But I think strategically speaking, that's the one thing that could really enable Israel to leverage its operational successes into a strategic reframing of regional realities and getting out of the situation, which is problematic now for the Israeli public and society.
Nimrod Gordon, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Time now for all of those other stories, and Leah's got those for us.
Thank you, Wilfred. Landslides in southern India have now killed more than 150 people as rescue teams continue to search through the debris. Torrential rain has caused mud and water to rush through villages. Since about Tuesday, more than 300 rescue workers are working tirelessly to free trapped residents, and a temporary hospital has been set up to treat the injured. Former BBC presenter Hugh Edwards is due to appear in court charged with making indecent images of children. The 62-year-old is alleged to have committed the 3 offences between December 2020 and April 2022. The broadcaster is accused of having had 37 photographs on WhatsApp, including 6 of the most serious type. 2 people have been killed after a helicopter crashed into a farm building in Ireland. The crash happened yesterday afternoon at a farm in County Westmeath. The Irish Air Accident Investigation Unit has sent a team of inspectors to the site. US Vice President Kamala Harris is now the only candidate seeking the Democratic nomination. The Democratic National Committee says around 99% of delegates have signed her nominating petition. The Vice President will hold her first rally with her new running mate on Tuesday in Philadelphia.
Yeah, thank you. Now, rising workplace sickness is costing the UK economy billions of pounds every year. New analysis shows the hidden cost of employee illness has risen by £30 billion since 2018. Here with all of the details on those numbers is Rachel Venables. So, Rachel, put this all in context for us.
Well, really, we know that people are sicker now than they were a few years ago. This is something that's been reported time and time again, people taking more time off work. But a report by the Institute for Public Policy Research has crunched the numbers and found out really fascinatingly that in 2023 compared to 2018 we were taking more sick days, but we were also working through sickness more as well. And they think that that has cost on average the UK economy £30 billion every single year. So if we were as well as we were in 2018, it would be 30 billion less. Now, they haven't crunch the total numbers. This is a bit of work from them. But it's really fascinating. They say that £5 billion of that cost came from staff absences, so people just calling in sick and not being able to work. But a massive £25 billion came from what they're calling presenteeism, which is effectively when you feel rubbish, you feel ill, under the weather, but you go into work anyway and you don't recover quickly enough, you also maybe pass that illness on to others. And this seems to be what's happening, because they talk about the UK being amongst the least likely to take sick days, people in the UK, but also much more likely to go to work anyway when they are sick. And obviously it is having this knock-on effect on the economy, and what they're calling for with this report is for a much greater understanding between health and wealth, and to support businesses particularly to allow their employees to be healthier and to take sick days when they need to.
Rachel Reynolds, great stuff, thank you. So to come here on The Breakfast Show, we'll bring you a roundup of all the latest Olympics action and news, and we'll be speaking to a retired Olympic gymnast as well.
They've pushed the protesters further back here. There's around 200 or 300 still remaining.
I'm Dan Whitehead and I'm Sky News' West of England correspondent.
This van goes onto the streets of Plymouth 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
These facilities at the moment are a lifesaver. It's all we've got.
From fishing communities to bustling cities, we spend every day reporting from across the region, hearing from people who have real stories.
I'll have nowhere to live for about 3 or 4 months.
There are still people inside the properties here.
They're coming from the epicentre of what is now a global health pandemic. We were seeing and speaking to young women who were selling themselves right on the high street. It was desperately sad, and the fact it was happening right in the heart of this community.
Before Brexit, these oysters were being exported to the EU, but the trade stopped overnight.
What's your feeling about the future then?
Blake might all be finished, I don't know.
Welcome back to Breakfast on Sky News. Well, in a moment we'll be speaking to the retired artistic gymnast Sam Oldham. But first, let's just remind you of the key takeaways from the action at the Olympics yesterday. Well, last night, Andy Murray delayed his retirement from tennis for at least one more match. He and Dan Evans are through to the quarterfinals of the men's doubles. The swimming quartet of James Guy, Tom Dean, Matt Richards and Duncan Scott won gold in the men's 4x200 metres relay freestyle, retaining their title from Tokyo. Nathan Hale secured a gold medal in the men's trap shooting final and achieved an Olympic record while doing it. The 28-year-old hit 48 out of 50 targets to break the previous record of 43. It's the first shooting medal for Team GB at the Paris Games. And then the United States' Simone Biles won her 5th Olympic gold medal after leading her team to victory in the women's gymnastic team final. There was heartbreak for Team GB as they narrowly missed out on a medal, coming 4th. Well, let's discuss that in particular with the retired gymnast Sam Oldham, who represented Team GB back in 2012, winning a bronze medal. Sam, great to have you with us. Sort of heartbreak, isn't it? Both the men's and the women's Team GB team coming 4th. Does that feel like success, or does it feel like great disappointment?
Well, good morning, guys. Thank you for having me. Yeah, very disappointing, obviously, with the 4th place last night. But I think looking at it going into the final, the women were not expected to be challenging for a medal. They qualified in 7th place. There was a big gap between the 3rd place in qualification and then where the GB women were. So they really did outperform. They've had a lot of injuries going into this Olympic Games. So some of the members that were part of the medal winning team in Tokyo are not part of that team. So I think for them, they really did outperform themselves. And it's just incredibly disappointing, obviously, when you miss out by literally one step. So if you imagine you got out of bed this morning, you took your first step, that's what they missed out on the Olympic Games by. In the men's event, the GB team, we did really well. I think it wasn't a case of us losing a medal, it was the Americans winning. They just were incredibly good. They hit 18 out of 18 routines. We had one mistake, but even with that mistake, it wouldn't have been enough for us to win the bronze medal. So, yeah, very disappointing that we finished in 4th place, but the results for us, I think the performances were great, but our real shot at medals here at this Olympic Games is in the apparatus finals, where in the men's event, we have 6 apparatus finals. So we have Max Whitlock going in the pommel horse, we have Jake Jarman, and we have Luke Whitehouse going on the floor. We have Harry Hepworth, who was the first British gymnast ever to qualify for a rings final, so an amazing achievement. And then we again have Harry on the vault and Jake on the vault. So we do have real shots at medals here at this Olympic Games and gold medals, but they're most likely to come in those apparatus finals, which will take place over the weekend.
Sam, I just want to talk about Becky Downey. Her performance on the uneven bars, excellent composure. She really smashed it. And missing out to 4th place, like Wilfred said, really frustrating, really gutting. Where do they go from here? Because Becky started her first Olympics age 16, she's 32 now. What goes through your mind when you get that 4th place?
Yeah, it's a very difficult. Everybody talks about this, right? Professional athletes, to finish in 4th, it's almost the worst place to finish. But I think for Becky, she did such an incredible performance last night on the asymmetric bars, so the uneven bars, which is her event. That's where historically she's had her best results. I think for her to make it to this Olympic Games at the age of 32, you know, I retired at 28, which is even quite late for a male gymnast. So to be still doing the Olympic Games at 32, given her story, if anybody back home listening understands her story, you know, she missed out on the Olympic Games quite controversially in Tokyo. Sadly, her brother passed away. She's managed to carry on for 4 years. And that routine last night, I think, was the best performance she's done in years under extreme pressure. So I think that puts her in good stead going into the asymmetric bars final at the weekend. And the uneven bars, a little bit like the high bar for the men, is one of those events where anything can happen because you have to let go and you have to catch the bars again. So if Becky can put in a performance like she did last night, which was the best score on the uneven bars of the whole evening last night, she could be in with a chance at getting a medal, which would be the most incredible story. But I think for the team going into the apparatus finals, we do have real shots at medals. I think the majority of those medals and the opportunities we've got are obviously with the men. The men have 6 finals, the women have 1. So for us, I think, you know, depending on how it goes in the floor event. Of course, we have the all-around finals coming up today and tomorrow. Realistically, I think the men have the best shot. And again, the top 2 spots are going to go to the Chinese and Japanese gymnasts. I'd be very surprised if that changed.
Sam, just a quick final word. We're nearly out of time. Simone Biles, is she the greatest gymnast of all time?
Yes, I mean, she is the biggest icon in gymnastics since Nadia Comaneci, right? To bring out celebrities like Tom Cruise and Ariana Grande is something that doesn't happen in our sport. 100% she is the greatest female gymnast of all time. You would argue she's the greatest gymnast of all time. For me, I think the 2 sports are very different, right? You've got the men competing on 6 apparatus, the women competing on 4. Many of those apparatus are very different. So I think we do this thing in sport all the time, don't we, where we compare men to women. But for me, they're just 2 very different sports. But in terms of gymnastics and the biggest star we've ever had in the sport, I think she is the greatest. And certainly for women's gymnastics, the greatest gymnast we've ever had. So yeah, I think she's the greatest female gymnast of all time.
Sam, great stuff. Thanks so much for that, Sam Oldham, joining us to discuss the gymnastics. It's funny, Sam, guys, they're saying, in that particular event of gymnastics, anything can happen. When I watch the gymnastics, I think anything can happen in all of them. And it is the most clear that displays extreme skill. I mean, there's endurance in some sports more than skill. I mean, there's skill and endurance in all, but it is remarkable
and
to watch.
Precision.
Unbelievable.
Literally 1 toe out of line and you fall off. It's incredible. And speaking of Simone Biles, did you see the images of Snoop Dogg, for some reason, is like her biggest cheerleader? And he was there in the crowd dancing, and they were like dancing to each other with the whole US team.
He's been very prominent throughout for the US
he's
team.
been holding the torch as well, hasn't he? Yeah, so he's a big fan of the US gymnastics team.
I have to say, I'm embracing the breakfast show slot during the Olympics.
You get to watch.
Get to watch a lot. I didn't stay up enough to watch the gold in the pool last night, which is a shame. Shooting, phenomenal, massive world record. He got 48 out of 50. Previous record was 43.
Pretty impressive.
Incredible stuff. Incredible.
Smashed
Right.
it.
We are out of time for this hour. We're going to have more on the Olympics next hour, but also at the top of the hour, all of the day's top stories. very good morning to you. It is 9 o'clock. Coming up on today's show, the political leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, has been killed in Tehran.
And we'll tell you why people going into work when they're unwell is costing the economy.
Plus, Angela Rayner plays down the prospect of a backlash among her own MPs at the government's push to build more houses.
It's Wednesday, the 31st of July. Your headlines. Iran says the Hamas political leader of the Gazan armed group has been assassinated.
Hamas says the killing was a treacherous Zionist raid on his residence.
And here in Southport, thousands of people gathered to remember the 3 young girls killed in an attack at a holiday club. And dozens of police officers are injured during a clash with protesters outside the local mosque. This is after the Home Secretary urged people not to spread false information about the suspect.
Good morning. We begin with breaking news. The political leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, has been killed in Tehran. Iran's Revolutionary Guards say he was assassinated in the Iranian capital and the cause of his death is under investigation. Hamas has said he was killed alongside one of his bodyguards. Well, we're joined now by our international correspondent, John Sparks, who's in Jerusalem for us this morning. John, talk us through the significance of this assassination.
Good morning, Wilfred. It's hugely significant. This is a massive escalation in this conflict, something that is turning into a regional war. What we have seen over the last 24 hours is outside of the parameters of what we have seen, which was a nasty, localized conflict centered on Gaza and the Lebanese border, in and around the Lebanese border. In the last 24 hours, we have seen the deaths of 2 senior leaders of Iran-backed groups. The first in Beirut overnight, Fouad Shakur, a senior Hezbollah commander. The Israelis said that he was responsible for the attack in Majd al-Shams in the Golan Heights, where 12 children died. The Israelis say they have eliminated him. The second, this morning, Ismail Haniyeh, a top leader, possibly the top leader, certainly the political leader of Hamas, last seen yesterday. He's been in Tehran, the Iranian capital, for the inauguration of that country's new president. The Iranians have released pictures of him meeting yesterday with the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. He has been killed. He was based in Qatar, and he's been in Qatar since 2017. He's a tough-talking character. He was leading the negotiations between Hamas and Israel over a ceasefire. He was leading the negotiations, the talks over an exchange of Israeli hostages in Gaza for Palestinian prisoners. The Israelis, it seems, have decided to take him out. They haven't admitted it. They rarely do that in public. I don't think there's any doubt, however, that they are behind this. We have heard from the Iranian Revolutionary Guards this morning, some powerful military faction in the Iranian government. They say they are investigating what has happened. They said they don't know what has happened, but we believe that this event took place in an apartment building in central Tehran. Clearly, it's a huge breach of security for the Iranians. It is embarrassing for them. I can tell you that the Iranian president has spoken this morning. He has vowed to defend the territorial integrity of Iran. He has essentially advocated that the Iranians will seek revenge. So this is a worrying point in this conflict.
Let's bring in also our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, who's in Beirut for us. Alex, this incident overnight, of course, turned focus, I guess, away from Beirut, where you are, which has been very much the centre of attention in the last couple of days, including yesterday itself.
I think it's really difficult to disentangle the 2 attacks because they came so close together and they're very much linked. Hezbollah being a big supporter and ally of Iran. Iran has been very much involved in their development, funding them, training them, advising them, providing intelligence. So one attack here, you can see the building behind me, and you can probably make out, actually, if Jake just focuses in, that people are still going through the rubble of this building where this senior Hezbollah commander. Now Hezbollah has come out just in the last couple of hours to confirm that he was present in the building. You can see it's a very congested, populated area around here, very big, densely populated neighborhood. We haven't had confirmation from Hezbollah of his death, but it seems unlikely that he would have survived that, and they will be duty-bound to announce that at some stage, probably today, if he has not survived. Certainly, according to the Lebanese Ministry of Health, there were a number of civilian casualties as well. They're saying more than 70, including a couple of children's deaths. Now, the actual ability for Israel to, as they saw it, specifically target a building in the heart of the Lebanese capital, and then just 12 hours later do another very targeted attack inside the Iranian capital has really escalated things. In all the talks that I had with everyone who was connected with the behind-the-scenes negotiations involving the UN, America, obviously Israel and Hezbollah, the mood music that I was being told from the Lebanese authorities, Lebanese senior military commanders, Hezbollah contacts, was that they had been assured by the intermediaries that they were trying to persuade Israel to exercise restraint, and any attack in response to the killing in Marshal Shams of 12 children, 12 footballers, which they blamed on Hezbollah, and Hezbollah has denied. They were assured that any response would be within accepted lines, and certainly the Lebanese foreign minister and a former general identified as hitting Beirut and affecting, killing or wounding civilians as a red line, which the Lebanese authorities and Hezbollah would see was out of the bounds of normal, accepted, calculated responses. So previously, I think, in the lead up to this, everyone felt that there was a real desire for it not to escalate. Now I think all bets are off about what the response is going to be, and you can be sure that there is absolutely frantic communications, conversations, negotiations going on to try to persuade Hezbollah and Iran now to moderate their response. But we're in a very different ballgame now, because previously Iran had indicated it did not want to be specifically involved in this, because they and Hezbollah kept on warning about the possibility of regional war. And we've heard from America, Israel's big ally, that they too are prepared to enter it and to take specific military action in order to defend Israel's right, as they see it, to defend their territory. So I think Hezbollah experts are reading this as a signal from both Israel and America that they don't really care if this escalates into a regional war. Now, whether it does or not is obviously a very different ballgame, and we're still not there yet. A lot of people also saying no one really wants this to escalate, but you can be sure that both Iran and now Hezbollah are going to respond. There's no way that they will not respond. The leader of Hezbollah has said repeatedly, that his mantra and Hezbollah's mantra is an eye for an eye. And he's made this clear over nearly 10 months of speeches that he's made on this subject, that he's directly addressed Israel, saying, you kill our civilians, we will kill your civilians. You kill our leaders, we'll kill your leaders. Now, whether that's possible even, we'll have to wait and see. But Israel has sent a very strong message that they're not going to put up with these cross-border attacks, or even Iran's support of these groups, fighting groups, which are spread all across the region, not just Hezbollah, by far the most strongest, stronger than the Lebanese army, who are sitting out here, but are basically, this whole area is controlled. This area where I am, the suburb of Beirut, is very much controlled by Hezbollah, so much so that they control your access to the sites, your access to people you talk to, whether you're here at all. is all controlled by Hezbollah. There are some Lebanese ministers here, actually. There's the energy minister is just coming behind. He's giving a number of interviews to other media right now. We'll try and grab him as soon as we can to hear what the Lebanese authorities are making of this. But having spoken to the Lebanese foreign minister just in the past few days, he is very shocked that the attack has happened. It's very rare that Israel would attack Beirut, and I think they've also signalled that all the leaders, Hezbollah leaders, all the Hamas leaders, they're going to reach them wherever they are, and that is not going to be left unresponded to by the parties involved. And now we've got Iran and Hezbollah who will be mulling over how to respond, and I think that's key now. How are they going to respond? How severe is it going to be? Is it going to be enough to draw in America or other fighting groups around the region, because there's a spread of them. Yet the Houthis in Yemen, a militia in Iraq, militia in Syria, who are all, and even supporters like Turkey, who was a big supporter. The president of Turkey, Recep Erdogan, was a big supporter of the Hamas leader, and even hosted him, pictured with him as recently as April, shaking hands with him. His office has delivered a furious reaction this morning, saying that, calling it a cowardly assassination attempt, and it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the region reacts. But we're in very difficult, dangerous territory right now, with no one really sure what's going to happen, but everyone trying to put a lid on it.
Alex and John, thank you both so much, and of course we'll have more coverage throughout the day live from the Middle East. We have some breaking news coming from Paris, and Team GB's Beth Potter has won bronze in the triathlon. Of course, the much delayed triathlon due to the quality of the water in the River Seine, but Beth Potter's come in for a bronze medal. The winner was the French Cassandra Beaugrand, winning in her home city. We're going to cross now live to Southport to get the very latest on the situation there. Sarah Jane there, as she has been all week following the stabbing attack on Monday.
Thanks very much, Wilf. Let's talk about the thousands of people, shall we, who gathered at a vigil here in the centre of Southport last night, gathering to pay their respects to the 3 young girls who were killed in Monday's knife attack. However, what followed that vigil were violent scenes. Protesters clashing with police outside a local mosque, the violent scenes spilling onto the streets that surround the scene here. We'll have more on that for you in just a moment. But first, our Chief North of England correspondent, Greg Milam, takes a look at what we know about the victims so far.
The faces of 3 young girls who all went to dance and never came home. 6-year-old BB King, 7-year-old Elsie Stancombe, and 9-year-old Alice Aguiar. BB's family said no words could describe their devastation. Elsie's school called her loving and bright, a kind and caring friend. Alice's family said she would always be their princess. A number of other children and adults remain critically ill after what police called a ferocious attack minutes before the Taylor Swift-themed dance event was due to end. Leanne Lucas was one of the organisers of that event. She ran her own company, teaching children about their well-being through dance. She is one of those in hospital.
How many more children, Prime Minister? Are we going to do something?
There was some heckling as the Prime Minister came to see the scene for himself, a reflection of the horror that has swept far beyond this community.
What, you going to stand up for our children?
Today is not the time for politics. Today is the time to focus entirely on the families who are going through such pain and grief.
And a response too from Taylor Swift herself. The horror of yesterday's attack, she wrote, washing over her continuously. These were just little kids at a dance class. I am at a complete loss for how to ever convey my sympathies to these families. A fundraiser set up by fans of the star has now raised hundreds of thousands of pounds. And from the community, the sympathy and the flowers keep on coming. The shock, the disbelief is palpable. We're learning more about the awful events, including how the man who owned the building tried to stop the attacker. His wife told Sky News he saw the man with a child on the floor. He tried to grab the knife, but was himself stabbed. All he wanted to do, she said, was help that child, but he wasn't able to. There is so much for this community to process.
It is the hardest thing that it's children, you know, the innocence and, you know, the Taylor Swift connection, joy, happiness, laughter on the first day of the, you know, real summer holidays, then going to the screams and the silence.
The 17-year-old remains in custody on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. Sky News spoke to a former neighbour in Cardiff, where he was born, who said he was from a normal and lovely family, and his mother was a good mum. This is an attack that has left its mark on even those used to dealing with the most awful of scenes. We can only imagine how long the scars will last for those who never thought this sort of horror could happen where they call home. Greg Milam, Sky News, Southport.
We're going to get back out to SJ for more coverage from Southport in just a moment. But first, some breaking news. The former BBC presenter Hugh Edwards has arrived at Westminster Magistrates Court. Of course, he's due to appear in court, having been charged with making indecent images of children. We can bring you the images of him arriving now. Our arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer is at Westminster Magistrates Court for us. Katie, he's just arrived?
Yeah, look, we haven't seen the BBC's former newsreader in public for over a year. It's been over a year since he was on the BBC News at 10 reading the headlines for them. This was a very different encounter with many of his peers, if you like. He walked very slowly around the corner from here into Westminster Magistrates. A swarm of photographers taking his picture. There was, such was the crush that one of the photographers actually sort of was pushed over in part of the sort of excitement to capture his picture. Hugh Edwards has spoken in the past about his Christian faith. There are also a number of Christian protesters here shouting things at the newsreader like repent. Look, he hasn't been seen in public in over a year, as I said. When he left the public eye, we know through his wife that she said that he has been experiencing a lot of mental health problems. This return to public life, to have to answer the CPS charges against him, it is a very, very different experience for the newsreader. We know now that he was questioned by the police last November, charged at the end of last month with 3 counts of making indecent images of children. From the charge sheet that we have, we know that relates to 37 images that he was in possession of on WhatsApp. The images came between 2020 and 2022, and 6 of those 37 images were classed as Category A, which are among the most serious images that you can be in possession of. In theory, the maximum charge that he could receive if found guilty of this would be 10 years in jail. But we are a long way off any sort of plea even being entered. This is a very basic hearing today. Well, Hugh Edwards will have the charges read to him and just the basics of his name and address will be confirmed.
Kate Spencer, thanks so much for that outside Westminster Magistrates Court. We're going to go back to Sarah Jane now in Southport, who's joined by some local residents to discuss the situation there.
Yes, thank you very much, Wilf. Stephen and Kelly Tully join me now, who live not too far from where we're standing, just a couple of streets away, just 2 minutes walk away. Thank you for coming to talk to us. We chatted earlier this morning,
Yes, we did.
as you were out walking, coming down to look at the floral tributes. Obviously, you're feeling the effects of Monday, but I just want to start by talking about what you saw last night, because things turned in the evening after that vigil in the town centre. What did you witness? How did you feel as the violence erupted?
People running at the police, basically police running at them, helicopters about.
Basically, it was unruly. It was quite scary, to be honest.
Scary, yeah.
Our grandson,
he's staying with us at the moment because they've come down for 2 weeks from the Midlands to stay with us, and obviously my 3-year-old grandson was scared because from our window you could see him over the bridge.
You could hear the shouting, the violence, and it was quite frightening, to be honest.
Because where we are now, we're at one of the floral tributes, the growing floral tributes, just yards away, you know, behind the cameras, is where some of that violence was erupted, and you could hear it, couldn't you? You could smell the smoke.
It was over here as well on the bridge.
Yeah, see the smoke from our bedroom window.
Yeah.
And it's just not nice to see.
No.
It was scary.
It was scary, yeah.
Speaking to residents here this morning...
I think everyone's in shock, though.
Yeah, I think you're all very keen to stress that what happened last night does not represent Southport.
No,
the large majority of those
peaceful,
people
quiet
causing the trouble last night do not represent the community, nor how you feel about what happened on Monday. There is anger, but not that.
Yeah,
we're angry, but you can't condone violence.
No,
you can't condone it.
There's the proper way to do it, and the police are doing their job.
Yeah. I was talking to a reporter from the Liverpool Echo, Ben Roberts-Haslam, on Monday. The Liverpool Echo have just put out something that I'll just bring to you now. This is the mother of one of the victims, little Elsie Stankham, who lost her life. Her mother, Jenny Stankham, has put on social media, according to the Liverpool Echo. She said, "This is the only thing that I will write, but please stop the violence in Southport tonight. The police have been nothing but heroic these last 24 hours, and we don't need this." And this has been the question that I've heard this morning talking to people. Why were the police being targeted last night? They were amongst the first on the scene last night. They have a suspect in custody. Yes, people are impatient for answers and justice, but...
I think some people are just doing it to get a reaction and to basically...
But the wrong reaction.
No, just to cause trouble in the town.
Yeah.
That's what I think. They come into these... Some gangs come in to cause trouble, but the people, the general of the community of Southport are mourning. They're actually mourning over it. So, honestly, I can't condone their actions, but I don't think that the families of the relatives, they want to see a closure to it, I feel.
Yeah. Kelly, how are you feeling about the coming days? Because obviously we're still right in the middle of this trauma, this community still right in the middle of this trauma.
It's my daughter's last night here tonight. We wanted to watch the sunset, and I said, are we going to be safe to even go down the seafront and watch the sunset?
Because you're worried about more scenes similar to last night.
Taking my 3-year-old grandson out.
Yeah.
You know, just don't feel safe.
Yeah. And as local residents, this literally, you know, I keep using the word on your doorstep. It literally is on your doorstep. It's just asking where we're standing where Monday's horrific attack happened. There are still children and 2 adults in hospital, other victims, children in that room that weren't taken to hospital but will be feeling the trauma of this. What do you want to say to those affected? Because you're all coming together and it's hard to know what to do, which is why we see so many people coming here, because they don't know where else to go, they want to talk to people, express emotion.
I mean, my heart breaks for the family. I just can't understand what they're going through. It makes you feel sick. What's happened?
Yeah, I think I'm more in shock than anything. It's like, you just can't believe it can happen in England. And I'm
especially Southport.
I feel like the government should protect us and do something about this knife crime, because I think if you carry a knife, you purposely want to go and injure someone, so you must be mentally disabled. So basically, you should do life or come out when you're safe to the public.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about it. Anyway, I don't know how anyone else feels about it, but that's how I strongly feel about it.
There is a suspect in custody. Police investigation ongoing. We'll continue to update everyone on the progress of that, because people want answers and justice, but they also want time to grieve and process what's happened. Look, I really appreciate you stopping to talk to me this morning. That's ended up in you being on air with me today, but just wanted to get a sense of how people are feeling this morning, because a lot's been happening here. It's a lot to take in.
Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Okay. Thanks very much. Thank you. Well, we can go now to our correspondent, Ashna Hirnak, who is outside the mosque. Not too far from here. Everything's walkable here in Southport. Violence started there last night, spilled out into the surrounding area.
And if you need anything, 27
clean-up operation in place this morning, led by community members.
So many community members have come out and people that live nearby, Sarah Jane, but we know that this was a night of extreme violence. Pockets of the crowd were particularly angry, and you can see some of the devastation that's been laid out. those demonstrators gathered. This is actually the fence that's been burned out. As you can see, the perimeter of this fence partially destroyed. Just up there, the top window of the mosque, you can see it's been cracked. Lots of these things on fire. You can see these bins here completely set alight last night. And up top, as I referenced, some of those windows had projectiles, we know, thrown at them. People I've spoken to, one woman that lives nearby, Carol, she told me that she saw them chipping away bits of masonry and taking bits from her garage or her neighbour's garage and start throwing them at shops and businesses. You can see lots of people now starting to gather around. This was packed this morning, though, filled with people just getting their gloves on. They were getting out brooms and they were just sweeping. And you can see some of the kind of final bits of the clean-up operation the council are now doing. There's a little boy over there that's brushing some of the dust away, clearly wanting to get involved, and some of the little girls as well. This, I've been told, is what Southport is all about. This is what people want. People to take away from their community. The scenes that they saw last night, they say, do not represent the people that live here. Even though we have been saying this morning that so many of those crowds last night were not from this local area. They were not from Southport. They were not from the wider region as a whole. Lots of people say that they spoke to some of them last night and they came and hailed from places like Brighton, from Wales. Others saying they came from Lancashire and travelled here, but there were a few, in the words of the Home Secretary, thugs that came here last night, injuring, as you make reference to, Sarah Jane, some 40 police officers, 8 of them we know suffering serious injuries. Just take a look down here, actually. You can see inside the perimeter of the mosque, those clearly members of that community this morning. That's the first time we're seeing them. They're probably here to try and assess the damage. And look, as you can look at this, just beyond, you can see some of the fencing that's being repaired already. This is, local work that's going on this morning. And look at the way it's been torn down last night. And some of those people are now repairing that fencing and that brickwork. A car, look at this car that was parked in clearly overnight. Clearly had bricks and bits of masonry propelled towards it. Our journalists on the ground last night watched it. Police van was set alight, and this was very much part of yesterday. They were kicking down residents' walls, and as you can see, these are local people, local businesses who are now starting to help restore some of this street. These were local people who were really frightened last night. This violence, they say, came out of nowhere. And it's just worth saying this anger was fueled by social media speculation surrounding the identity of the suspect, almost all of it completely false. For many people here, they feel like this has come out of nowhere and they feel incredibly disheartened and devastated that the scenes they saw last night have thoroughly, in their words and their eyes, taken away from the tragic attack on Monday.
Ashna, thank you so much. As you can see, the clean-up operation and the rebuild of people's front gardens and streets and roads around here continues quickly this morning. The residents of Southport that I've been speaking to say they want to get back to some sense of normality this morning, if you can call this new normality. Of course, they're still trying to process what happened on Monday, but all of them at pains to point out that what unfolded here last night, the violent scenes, doesn't represent how the community are feeling. Yes, they are angry. Of course they're angry. That's to be expected after the horror that they saw on Monday and what has happened to the victims, but that is not how they want to be represented. We will continue to talk to people here today in Southport because there's more to come in this story. We are still very much in the middle of this. We'll continue to reflect the thoughts of the community and bring you updates on the police investigation as well when we get it. So many people wanting updates on that. We'll bring them to you as and when we can. Right now, I'll hand back to the studio.
SJ, thanks so much. Lots more of the day's other news to come here on The Breakfast Show as well. We've got less than 100 days until the US election. We'll be speaking to a former senior aide from the Clinton administration about the election next.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling?
I am angry.
It is an anti-woman agenda.
2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Are you going to catch this killer?
We are doing everything we can.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
We're so excited.
Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that, but there are a lot of people who aren't.
It's not the winds people fear most here, it's the water. We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world. Do you truly believe what you're saying?
A lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous.
Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. Well, coming up, author Ava Glass will join us to discuss the real-life inspiration for her spy novels and why she thinks the next James Bond should be a woman. But first, let's talk about the very latest in the US election. Kamala Harris is set to tour battleground states next week and likely will do so with her soon-to-be-announced running mate. The US Vice President will visit 7 states as she vies for the White House. I'm joined now to discuss all this. Maurice Reed, former Clinton administration senior aide and a partner at Actum. Very good morning to you, Maurice.
Morning.
Thanks for joining us.
I think James Bond is in America now running for president. What are you, a woman?
Yeah, there we go. Let's touch. So 7 battleground states next week.
Correct.
A lot of reporting now suggesting she wants to announce her running mate before that. Is that your expectation?
Sure, it makes a lot of sense. And when you're doing this, you want to play chess, right? This is 3-dimensional chess. So if you're looking at a running mate, you want to pick someone that helps you put things on the board, right? So you have 3 states, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, 3 Democratic governors. You probably want to keep them there because that's the strongest base. But what you want to do is make your challenger move things. So you want to move things around. So either Arizona or North Carolina. It looks like Arizona is the place they really are going to put their money in. Perhaps Kelly would be the guy.
He's the senator from Arizona.
He's the senator from the war hero, astronaut. You know, they can really, launch her campaign in a very compelling way, I think.
So a lot of the expectations at the moment, I would think, reading a lot of this, is that she would pick, in fact, one of those governors you mentioned, in particular the governor from Pennsylvania.
See, that's the traditional thinking. But as I said, you want it to be 3-dimensional. When you have 3 states where you have women, minority, and the youngos coming home, you want to double down. And the way you double down is to keep your strongest people there. The governors are the strongest people. You don't want to move them off the board. So you want to double down, give them more money. The way you do this is by 3-dimensional. You make your opposition move things, they have to defend. So you're going to defend something that's going to either be Arizona, Georgia, or North Carolina. It looks like the likely thing is that they're going to make them defend Arizona, where they feel that they have the strongest possibility to win if they bring Kelly on to the ticket.
So interesting, and so we'll see if that is announced in the days ahead. Any of those names we've mentioned, are they enough of a differentiating factor, enough of an offset for Kamala Harris to win genuine swing ground, middle ground voters? Or is there still an aspect for both parties about trying to turn out your base and focusing on your core support?
Yeah, it's all about core, right? So you want to double down on your ground game. Democrats have traditionally done better than Republicans in turning out the vote, as they call it, GOTV. But with money, as you know, it's always the X factor. With money, you're able to really reinvest and invest in places you need. So the ground game will be, I think, really key. The race is about 50-50 right now, so it's really going to come down to who can really identify those middle-of-the-road women voters, right? Women are going to play a significant role here, and energize them and turn them out ultimately.
You mentioned money. I mean, how struck have you been by the scale of fundraising?
It's unbelievable. I've never seen it like this. And she did $200 million, but the party and the committees around it, $500 million. It's $500 million in a week. That tells you two things. One, there's a lot of money in America, right? But it also tells you that the pent-up demand, Joe Biden did the right thing because once he got out, the enthusiasm was there and the money came back, which was the most important.
Was it quite damning on him remaining in as long as he did?
Oh, I think that it was. I think it was really going to be Trump's to win, right? If he had stayed in. But it's critical when the money tells you they're going to stay on the sideline, and they actually started to stay on the sideline and quickly turn when Harris became the odds-on favorite.
So talk to me about what her potential weaknesses are. The first week or two obviously has been very positive. Fundraising certainly indicates that. We've still got 100 days. There's a lot of time to make errors. What are the core areas that she needs to make sure she doesn't make?
Yeah, so there's two Harris to think about. There's the Harris that ran for president, right? She was a politician, right? She was not compelling. She wasn't authentic. She couldn't connect or was relatable.
Why? What was the errors there?
The errors, she was trying to be a politician and not her authentic self, right? Her authentic self is a prosecutor, right? She's come out of the gates very authentic, very in command of the issues, right? She's taking their case to the American people. She's prosecuting the case. When she's there, when she's authentic and comfortable, she's relatable and compelling. That's very critical right now. She has to stay relatable and compelling. And you look at her messaging, the freedom is very aspirational. Everyone can see themselves in it. And that's the way you bring people to the table when you have an aspirational message. So the thing for her is to stay authentic. Don't fall into the trap of trying to be a politician, right? Stick to your knitting, to your core base, and she'll do very well.
There's been a lot of talk in the last week or so about whether the next debate will or won't happen, still likely to happen despite a bit of a shouting match around it.
Sure.
Also, we haven't seen her in a really heated interview yet. Are those environments where she'll thrive or not?
I think she'll do quite well in the debate, quite frankly. And I think she'll do great under pressure of some of these heated interviews as she gets there. Again, if she sticks to what she does well, being a prosecutor, being compelling, making her case. If she does that, she'll do very fine. Now, I tell you, if Donald Trump doesn't debate her, it's not the end of the day. And frankly, what she should do, if he doesn't debate, she should take her case to the American people with her running mate and have town hall meetings where she's talking to people. Because ultimately, this election is going to come down where people feel like they're understood and people being seen, right? People want to be seen and understood. That's where she has to make the case that she's relatable and understands everyday American issues.
There are a lot of examples of sort of underwhelming interview performances that she's given as vice president. Are those being trumpeted louder than they were representative of all of her performances, or was she sort of lacking a bit of focus in the time as vice president? What's your take on some of those well-known?
I think there's pre-Harris and post-Harris, right? Clearly, up until this time when she was a vice president, she struggled, right? Because she wasn't put in a position where she could be very compelling. She started to get better when she started to move on this reproductive rights tour, taking on these women issues. She was under the spotlight, right? As a vice president, you don't get a lot of spotlight. She was out there on the campaign trail. She started to find her rhythm. And in politics, rhythm matters. So once she got the call, once she stepped up, she had hit her stride. So all the stuff she did prior to this doesn't really matter, right? It's now, this next 100 days, how does she make a compelling case and stay focused? That's, very difficult for politicians, in particular Democrats. You have to be disciplined and you have to be unemotional.
What's your final take on whether so you're expecting it to be Mark Kelly as the running mate?
I think, looking at the data of what they're doing, I think Kelly's probably the odds-on favorite.
And in terms of what happens from here, I mean, it's very, very tough, too tough to call?
No, I think it's a toss-up. It really is going to come down to who really are the most relatable, who can identify their voters, and who can be disciplined. The president, Trump, is not always disciplined. She has to be disciplined. In order for her to win, she has to be disciplined, unemotional, and focused.
Maurice Reed, great to see you as always. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Lots more still coming on The Breakfast Show. We'll be discussing Andy Murray and Dan Evans getting through to the quarterfinals in the Olympics. That's coming up next. Welcome back. We've got some breaking news on the situation in the Middle East. So we brought you the news earlier that the Hamas political leader Ismail Haniyeh had been killed overnight in Tehran. John Sparks, in his earlier report, was explaining how Iran's foreign minister hadn't gone too far in terms of what he'd said in response and hadn't gone specifically to name Israel as being the culprit. Well, we have now got some lines crossing from Iran's supreme leader, who's vowed revenge against Israel over the killing of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. So a much more pronounced response from the ultimate leader in Iran, the Ayatollah. So we'll keep an eye on the significance of that. It certainly appears to be escalating rhetoric, at least. Will remain to be seen what actions are taking from Iran following the killing of Hamas's political chief in Tehran overnight. We're going to talk about the Olympics now, and let's take a quick look at the latest action from yesterday and overnight. Well, Andy Murray delayed his retirement from tennis for at least one more match. He and Dan Evans through to the quarterfinals of the men's doubles now. They survived a couple of match points against them once again. We also saw a gold for James Guy, Tom Dean, Matt Richards and Duncan Scott in the men's 4x200 metres relay freestyle in the pool. They retained their title from Tokyo. Nathan Hale secured a gold medal in the men's trap shooting final and achieved an Olympic record while doing it. The 28-year-old hit 48 out of 50 targets. The previous record was 43, so he smashed it. His first shooting medal for Team GB at the Paris Games. And in the gymnastics, Simone Biles won her 5th Olympic gold medal for the US after leading her team to victory in the women's gymnastic team final. Heartbreak for Team GB. They narrowly missed out on a medal. They came 4th. Let's discuss the tennis in particular now with the director of the National Tennis Association, Chris Evans, joins us. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. Again, remarkable result there for Murray and Evans, surviving 2 match points against them and coming through to the quarters now.
Incredible, wasn't it? Probably summarises Andy Murray's career perfectly, doesn't it? Having you on the edge of the seat and thinking that it is a foregone conclusion to be a loss. And, yeah, some kind of miracle and magic happens, especially Monday night. I mean, quite terrifying. 5 match points down and, yeah, thought everything was over and comes back to win. And last night, same sort of drama.
Chris, very good morning to you. It's Leah here.
Morning.
We saw those pictures, didn't we, of Dan and Andy celebrating. Talk to us a little bit about their partnership and how connected they are and the success that that potentially could bring.
Well, I think it's interesting because I think they're good friends, and you know, poor old Dan hasn't had a fantastic year with injury and form, and I think he's under tremendous pressure to try and support Andy in what is his last event. So I think he's done incredible. And if anything, I think Dan's pulled him through both of the matches. But I mean, you could see from the pictures, amazing emotion. And I think, you know, the British public felt it as well.
Whatever happens in this particular Olympics, is Andy Murray the greatest tennis player of all time to come from Great Britain?
Oh, 100%. I don't think anybody can argue. I think you know, your average tennis follower might be a bit torn with whether they like him as a personality, but I think within the tennis community, no doubt, the greatest tennis player, and you know, arguably he's probably one of the greatest sports people that's come from the UK, completely, I would say.
Talking about Andy Murray's career, you know, we look back at the 2008 Olympics and he lost in straight sets. He's had lots of adversity, but, you know, Wimbledon champ, gold medal at London 2012. What he is an ambassador for tennis. It's inclusivity too. That's so important, isn't it, for him moving forward and what he might do after retirement?
100%. I mean, I think we're all very hopeful that he's going to stay involved, but I have no doubt he will. I think he's very much been focused for a number of years to try and get back to his best, which, although there's been glimpses, is you know, he's not been able to sustain it with his body. So, you know, me personally, it's quite a bittersweet moment because, you know, it's quite emotional seeing, you know, seeing him come to the end. But boy, he's done incredible for British tennis, and you know, his legacy will go on, no doubt.
Chris, thanks so much for joining us.
Not a problem at all.
So to come here on The Breakfast Show, we'll be talking to a spy novelist who writes about her own career, formerly having worked for MI5 and MI6 as next.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, you know, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Are you going to catch this killer?
We are doing everything we can.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
I'm so excited. Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that, but there are a lot of people who aren't.
It's not the winds people fear most here, it's the water. We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world.
Do you truly believe what you're saying?
A lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Welcome back. Spy fiction author Ava Glass relies on first-hand experience in her novels, including her newest work, where a young female agent is trying to stop an assassination attempt. Ava's with us now. Very good morning to you, Ava.
Good morning.
So you worked previously in the security services?
Yes, as a communications expert. So I did counterterrorism communications, basically.
And so got first-hand experience of what actually goes on in these organisations.
Yes.
Is that, when you come to write the novels, to make them as exciting as possible, something that means you don't have to exaggerate the realities at all, or does it give you ideas to then expand on a little bit?
I think that's the perfect way of putting it. It gives me ideas of sort of how to make it real without breaking any national security laws. So I've seen a bit of what they do, enough to help me understand what that world is like.
And the new book, talk us about it a little bit. It's set in only just a week, it unfolds in, across Scotland and Rome. Tell us a bit more about it.
So the book takes place just before a G7 summit, which is set in Edinburgh. And right at the start of it, GCHQ is getting chatter that there's an attack planned, but they don't know who's behind it or what it's going to be. They think it might be an assassination, but they've got to stop it before Air Force One lands.
And the other central part of this is your lead character is a female spy, not a male spy.
Yes, that was critical to my sort of planning for this book, because when I worked for the government, I met so many female spies, and yet they weren't represented in fiction. Like, I'd read the entire canon of 20th century spy fiction, and there are no sort of sane, interesting, believable female spies in any of those books.
And obviously, we obviously in this country talk a lot about the likes of James Bond. Do you think this is just in print? Or is it also when it comes to television and film that there's lacking representation in that sense?
That's such a good point, because television and film do a much better job of representing what I saw in terms of the gender of spies, which is almost 50-50 in my experience. And there are some amazing series about female spies on television and some brilliant films, but books, for some reason, they've not gone into that world for some reason in that way.
Do you think there is sufficient representation in film and television? I mean, again, James Bond in this country has a much more prominent place than any female rival spies. Maybe not rivals, but you know what I mean.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean, but he's been around longer.
Mm-hmm.
He's the king of spies. You can't just come up out of nowhere and begin to sort of equal that, if you see what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
But I think with time, there could be a worthy alternative, female alternative, shall we put it?
Well, there we go. I mean, are you alluding to hoping your books get picked? Maybe they already have been picked up for TV representation.
Well, they've been optioned, and we're always hopeful that that will get made. Screenplays are being written, and we'll see where that goes.
Well, there we go. Good luck with that. And then, I mean, you also have a background of having been an investigative journalist, particularly for the New York Times. Is it a very sort of competing skill set or complementary skill set when you get into fiction writing, having previously obviously having to be laser focused on facts only to then, I guess, start to embellish things?
Oh, it's fascinating that it is such a difference. And the first book I ever wrote was terrible. It didn't ever see the light of day because I was trying to write what I really knew, what had really happened, but that's not fiction. And it wasn't until I learned to let go of my own life and the things I knew to be true in order to write, to make it up. Making it up is hard to learn for a journalist.
And Ava, the book is out now. Remind us of the title.
It's called The Trap. It's by Ava Glass, and it comes out tomorrow.
There we go. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's have a quick look at the weather before we leave you. And the heat will continue for some until Friday, but a thundery breakdown will begin from the south today. It's mostly fine and warm now, but Scotland is a little chilly for the end of July. Most places will stay dry through the morning with plenty of sunshine, but the far south of England may see a few showers. The southeast looks most at risk, with thundery downpours possible by lunchtime. It'll be rather warm. Hot again in the increasingly muggy south of Britain, but some eastern coasts will have a cooling breeze. That's your weather.